Rachel, and today we're talking about The Deer and the Dragon. This is the first in a series called No Other Gods. This is a new book and a new series from the same author as The Night and Its Moon. It's not a secret that I think that The Night and Its Moon is very poorly written, but No Other Gods is a paranormal urban sort of fantasy, whereas this is a high fantasy. And not only is it a paranormal / urban fantasy set in the real world, it also features discussion about Christian evangelical fundamentalism. Two things I want to read about. So I tried it and I had to put it down almost immediately. And then I tried again, and the third time was the charm. I finally finished it. Thanks in great part to tandem reading the audio and ebook at the same time. Did I think that this was better than The Night and Its Moon? Stay to find out. This series is about a woman named Marlo. Marlo is a former sex worker who became an author, and she was raised in Christian fundamentalism. She has for a long time been visually seeing a man who she calls Caliban, who she is convinced is not really there. He's a demon. But due to her upbringing, she is hesitant to believe what she sees. Speaking of seeing, I'm doing that quite well, thank you. All thanks to GlassesUSA.com, which is where I got my glasses. And if you don't know, GlassesUSA.com is one of the biggest eyewear retailers in the United States. They offer thousands of eyeglasses and sunglasses in brands that you'll recognize such as Ray-Ban, Oakley, Gucci, and many more. And they also offer contact lenses. I have multiple frames from GlassesUSA.com that I love. I love their Amelia E brand, which these are from their Amelia E brand, as are my favorite sunglasses. And these are in my prescription, so I can see I was at a rather large event recently outside, and I would not have been able to see if it were not for my prescription sunglasses. Shout out Amelia E brand. It's also sunny as hell in Florida, quite literally, and these are the only things saving my life going outside right now. But these are my favorite eyeglasses. You've probably seen me wear these a million times. I have said before, I'll say it again, I like to look like a millennial hipster at all times. And these are my favorites for that purpose. GlassesUSA.com has recently launched a gorgeous collection handpicked and curated by the amazing actress Marsai Martin, inspired by her advocacy for positive representation and breaking barriers. And you can check out this collection exclusively on GlassesUSA.com by clicking the links in my description. And if you love any of these frames, there's an exclusive offer just for my followers that you can snag by using that link below. And if you are a contact lenses girly, GlassesUSA.com is the perfect place to stock up on your lenses and save. You can get 25% off all contact lenses, Vista, AccuView, Biofinity, and many more. They're available with any prescription for all users. We all like to shop online, but shopping for eyeglasses can be kind of hard to do online because you need to be able to see in person what they're going to look like on your face. But I like using GlassesUSA.com for shopping online for glasses, specifically because they have AR virtual try-on. I used it to pick out all of the frames that I've gotten from them. It's very helpful. You can actually see what the glasses are going to look like on you before you buy. And GlassesUSA.com is a risk-free shopping experience with free shipping and returns and a 100% money-back guarantee within 14 days. And again, they have an exclusive offer waiting for my followers on top of any coupon they have currently running on the website, but it's only available for 24 hours, so click that link down below in my description to get started and get all of the details you'll need. And thank you so much to GlassesUSA.com for sponsoring today's video. Let me give you the synopsis for The Deer and the Dragon, the trigger warnings, and a disclaimer. Synopsis reads, the deities you call aren't always the ones who answer. I like that. I like it. Marlo needs to be able to believe, what? Why am I, oh my gosh, why am I adding words? This is what happens when I don't have dark background. Marlo needs to believe she's crazy. The alternative would mean embracing the gift or curse shared by her mother, and she can see angels in what? Is this copied and pasted from Goodreads? Because I didn't just add that. Oh, shenanigans. That's a weird sentence. The alternative would mean embracing the gift or curse shared by her mother, and she can see angels and demons. I swear to God, I copied and pasted this from Goodreads. Okay, well, we'll just move on. She needs to believe she's crazy. Alternative would mean embracing the gift or curse that she also shares with her mother. I'm just going to paraphrase this. And she can see angels and demons, including a dark and haunting entity who's been with Marlo her entire life. At least she believes that's all he is, until a fae from the Nordic pantheon strolls into her life and informs her that she's been sharing a bed with the Prince of Hell, a prince who's now gone missing. Before she knows it, Marlo is deeply entangled in a centuries-old war, stumbling straight into a battleground between mighty beings of myth and legend from powerful pantheons around the world. And who will come out on top may just depend on her and the love she never dared to believe in. So, as I said, paranormal urban fantasy, so we're doing like many pantheons. Our main character is like an 8th fae. She is claimed by the Nordic pantheon. Other pantheons come up, but mostly we are dealing with Nordic pantheon and then heaven and hell. So we have like demons and angels. Christianity and the Christian God comes up quite a lot. I'm gonna shock you all by saying this, considering how much I hate it in The Night and Its Moon, specifically because I feel like religion was so poorly done there. This is good mostly on talking about Christianity from the perspective of somebody who has deconstructed. In fact, I found myself saying, dang, that's a good way to put that. I too have felt that more than once. Especially though because, as stated in the synopsis, Marlo and her mom both see things that are supernatural. Marlo's mom is an evangelical Christian, and she sees things as being spiritual warfare. I don't think, did the term spiritual warfare come up? I'm not sure, but basically spiritual warfare is this idea that the forces of heaven and the forces of hell are in an ongoing battle for your soul and everybody's soul. And this is deeply held belief in evangelical Christianity. And Marlo's mother is of the opinion that the war for Marlo's soul is ongoing, and her daughter keeps, letting the demons win. And Marlo's mom desperately wants to have her come back to the Christianity side, despite the fact that, that's not really reality. And Marlo stopped believing all of the Christianity stuff, but started to believe, maybe I'm just mentally ill. Is the mental illness rep in here good? Oh, it depends on who you ask. Some lines were a little iffy, but I have to point out to you that the Christianity stuff in here is very on par, like very, very true to the realities of many people who grew up in evangelical fundamentalist culture and deconstructed. So if you are looking for a book that does that, because I can't really name you any other book that is paranormal urban fantasy that is talking about the beliefs of somebody who is deconstructed or is experiencing deconstruction. This is the only book I can name for that for you. So if you are looking for that, you should read this. Is it itself good? I have a list of complaints, so let's just go through it all, and then I will let you know at the end what my rating was. Do I think it's better than The Night and Its Moon? Yes, I do. But again, I do still have a list of complaints. I'm picky. What do you want me to say? Let me give you trigger warnings and then a disclaimer. The book starts with a couple things. It says, a note on sex work. There is no trigger warning for sex work, just as there are no trigger warnings for loan officers, real estate agents, veterinarians, or authors. Sex worker empowerment and destigmatization is an issue that is important to me and is prevalent in many of my works. If something about sex work causes you discomfort, my goal is not to make the environment more comfortable for you, but to encourage you to confront thoughts and feelings on whorephobia. For more information, please read the lived experiences, articles, and input from sex workers themselves as they contribute to, there's this blog, I will link it down below, and other resources. A resource in particular that I always tell people to read is Porn Work by Heather Berg, which is a Marxist feminist perspective on sex work, centering the voices of a wide variety of sex workers. So sex workers who are also people who are disabled, sex workers who are people of color. So I cannot recommend this highly enough if you are looking for another resource on learning about sex work. Okay, so another disclaimer and then trigger warnings about No Other Gods. The No Other Gods series is a work of fiction, comedy, commentary, and irreverence. While it has been thoroughly researched and informed by my lived experience in the church, it is in no way representative of the religious majority or meant to be a how-to handbook on interacting with the supernatural of any realm or pantheon, or a reflection of the personalities of the beings within them. Book 1, The Deer and the Dragon, has, so this is the actual trigger warnings list, themes of grappling with mental health, the main character not looking upon their mental health with kindness or grace, themes of intergenerational trauma, tumultuous religious upbringing, parent-child emotional abuse, and corporeal punishment? Isn't corporeal the physical material body? Isn't it corporal punishment? Okay, moving on. Corporeal punishment I don't think is what was meant there, but it's kind of funny as it's, dealing with. Okay, we'll move on. Neglect, creative depictions of deities, demons, fae, sex and explicit sexuality, cursing, drinking, and alcohol consumption, references to war, dubious consent resulting in attempted sexual assault by villain, death, violence, murder. I think that covers it. I might have added some more in my notes, but if that doesn't cover everything, I will bring it up later as I read off my notes to you. The last thing I want to say is, as the disclaimer said, this is a work of fiction, so I will be reviewing it for the work of fiction that it is. Okay? Okay, so the fun part about doing this video is that I have absolutely no script. I have highlighted the entire book as I was tandem reading between the audio and the ebook, but I read it on Hoopla, which is the library app, and Hoopla does not let you export your notes, so I could not make a script for this, so we are doing this raw. Okay, so it starts out saying, to queer women everywhere who ended up in relationships with men as ongoing proof that who we love is not a choice. Hey babe! He's making his lunch, but I guess I should ask him if he knows that since I'm pansexual, me loving him was not by choice. It also starts with a character playlist. Turns out that there is art for each of the characters. Well, at least all the characters on this playlist. I had somebody send me all of the art for them. It also comes with their drinks and stuff. I'm just gonna use the art, and the same person who did the art on the cover, which the cover is gorgeous, is Helena, and I will link that artist down below. And Helena did all the art, so I'm just going to use the art for the people who have art, and then the people who don't have art, I will just use whatever the fuck I choose. This is gonna be the longest fucking video. Fuck! And then it starts with a pronunciation guide, but there's a typo in the pronunciation guide because the name Fauna has an S in it where it shouldn't be. So it says Fasana when it shouldn't say Fasana, which is objectively hilarious, but we will be calling her Fauna, not Fasana. I assume that it's a misprint because the audiobook said Fauna, not Fasana. So chapter 1, we start out and it says, April 15, age 26. I stared down the barrel of the lesser of two evils, the flesh and blood disappointment of a human man, or a life trapped in my imagination with a fictional lover. So this is why it took me like thrice to start this book, because that sentence is so wonky. And like the rest of the book is not like this, so I don't know why we started it like this and didn't fix that. I stared down the barrel. Okay, so we're saying that the barrel, so the lesser of two evils is the shot. I think that the problem is that it should say I stared down the barrel at the lesser of two evils, because then at least we wouldn't be saying the lesser of two evils is the shotgun. Either way, this is a ridiculous sentence. I stared down the barrel of the lesser of two evils, the flesh and blood disappointment of a human man, or a life in my imagination, trapped in my imagination with a fictional lover. I watched the man across from me chew his food with his mouth slightly ajar, not bothering to swallow before he went on to name drop yet another notch in society's belt, which is another really odd sentence. He was holding his chopsticks wrong. He had mixed wasabi directly into his soy sauce. This was my first clue that Marlo is a fucking annoying ass human. Marlo thinks that these things are like important. I don't think Marlo, as far as I could tell from this book, has ever been to Japan, but as somebody who lived in Japan for 2 years, I can tell you that literally nobody gives a shit if you mix your wasabi in your soy sauce. I don't know why Marlo does, but Marlo's really obsessed with aesthetics. So she's inner monologuing about herself while staring at this man who she's on a date with, who is disappointing because, you know, he mixes wasabi and soy sauce. I was halfway through my 26th year, not so sure that this was the finished product I wanted for my mind. I was doing my best to be normal. This was what normal people did, right? They went on terrible dates with ordinary humans. They didn't see things that weren't there. They didn't cling to ghosts and maladaptive fantasies they'd conjured in the dark. They took their medications, they went to therapy, and they learned how to distinguish what was real. So as far as the mental health rep in this, it's like disclaimed that it's Marlo thinking things that are shitty. I went ahead and ran by Jules. I ran this book by Jules. Shout out to Jules, who also read it, to like see what Jules's thoughts were, because Jules has a bachelor's in psychology, so I thought that that would be the best option, is just, you know, hey, what do you think about this, rather than giving my ideas on it, which was, this is probably not great even though it's disclaimed. So I'll go over what Jules said about it later, when I really just get into the nitty-gritty. What is wrong with my mouth? And her date, who she can't remember if his name is Josh or Jared, is like, are you listening? And she's like, oh yes, totally. And explains that her dating profile and herself, she says, painted, waxed, and squeezed in the most stunning dress, sporting the glossiest hair and the most charming smiles. I was a living superlative. I'd spent my life learning how to make the perfect first impression. My profile had been curated to snag any curious suitor. First was a high-resolution picture that a friend had taken 4 years prior on a boat in Rio de Janeiro, blah, blah, blah. So first of all, I just want to say Brazil mention, and it's not the last one. There's gonna be a lot of those.
Eu estou no limite, Brasil.
And second of all, this is the start of the book and we are already learning how much Marlo thinks about Marlo and how much Marlo thinks about Marlo's ability, very high ability to manipulate other people. And she just sort of glosses over this, like this is just a fact about herself. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that this is something that she really admires in herself, is her ability to manipulate other people, particularly men. Now personally, Marlo thinks that that's great, and Marlo's love interest thinks it's great, and seemingly everybody around Marlo thinks that it's great. Everybody around Marlo thinks that Marlo's great. I think that Marlo's kind of a piece of shit. And I would have given this book a higher rating if Marlo wasn't the main character. Whatever dream you wanted to project on me, I gave you the option right there in my intricately tailored series of images. They'd leave thinking they'd met their soulmate. I'd leave wondering if I could catch the newest episode of Fire and Swords, or if I'd have to wait until it was on a streaming service. He asks, have you been to the Galapagos? She says, I've wandered my way through a lot of South America, but I was teaching English as a second language. She's mostly ignoring him and thinking that she wants to go to the aquarium and take mushrooms, which bitch same. He says, should we go back to my place? She's like, no. And he's like, what about the concert next week? She's like, I'm so sorry, gotta go. And this is like a theme about how much Marlo doesn't want to hang out with basically anybody around her except this fictional dude she's made up. Except we find out he's not fictional at all. Her friends text her, how was the banker? And her two friends are Kirby and Nia. And her friends are like, you should go out and do things. And she's like, I just want to stay home and eat cheese in my sweatpants. And I'm like, that's relatable. I'm literally wearing sweatpants right now. You think I'm dolled up from the waist down? Please. But the weird thing is that like her friends talk about her as if she's not there. She's always been a slut for cheese. She's like, the friends are so unnecessary to this book. They just exist to like talk about how great Marlo is, and they almost like deify her, which is very weird. I guess that's sort of the point though, because she is almost like a deity in a way, or at least she's kind of going to be. She goes home. She lives in a upcycled warehouse where she lives in a suite because she has a ton of money. After she stopped her work in sex work, where she was specifically an escort who made a ton of money, good for her, she went on to become an author of a fantasy series called Pantheon, and each book features a different pantheon. She goes inside her apartment and a male voice from the shadows says something to her, and she's like, don't do this to me. And he says, didn't it go well as in the date? And she's like, he was utterly forgettable. The male voice says, they all will be. And she's like immediately horny. And this is our introduction to Caliban, who is the love interest. By the way, speaking of Caliban, if you have not read Caliban and the Witch by Sylvia Federici, I highly recommend you do so. Or you can watch Lou's video on it. I can't not shout out Caliban and the Witch, I'm sorry. So this is the guy who she thinks that she is hallucinating. He's like immediately coming on to her. Oh God, I gasped when he grazed the soaked evidence of my black lace panties. Are you going to let me in? But
Senhoras e senhores, a partir desse exato momento eu tenho o prazer e a satisfação de informar a todos os presentes que vai começar a putaria!
She says, I'm trying to stop, and he says, as if I don't know you, love. We both know it'll never make you happy, but if you prefer mundane restaurants and forgettable men over what I can offer you, despite the bandage-tight dress around my hips and the puddle of evidence on my legs. Okay, I knew he wasn't there. He hadn't been there in a long, long time. I'm really not sure if this meant that she is in fact hallucinating him this time, like he was previously there and now he's really not there this time. I don't know, it's a little wishy-washy, and in fact, like, Caliban in general is just underutilized in this book. And the first, I'd say 25 to 30% of this book is completely unnecessary. Everything we just did with that guy who mixes wasabi and soy sauce, everything we just did was totally and utterly useless. And it's going to remain totally and utterly useless until about 30%, which made it kind of a slog to get through. However, I will say once we hit that 30%, I was actually quite interested. Now, did it fall off at the end? Absolutely it did. The ending of this was, I remember hitting the last page and turning and then being like, why does it say acknowledgements? That's a really stupid way to end a book. We'll get there. This is chapter 2. Josh had been busy after he'd left the restaurant. I'd missed 17 drunken texts and had 2 voicemails, all anchored around the theme of how we had something really special. We could go the distance before pivoting into how I was an ugly slut. Well, such is life with men. Not my guy though. We love Carlos. I grabbed the oat milk from the fridge. I had a magnet with the cover of my first book that had sent me into hysterics the first time I'd seen it, the trinket in a bookstore. A second magnet of the Colombian flag. Is that Colombian flag? Isn't Colombian supposed to be Colombian?
Não consigo gravar muito bem o que você falou porque você fala de uma maneira burra.
Okay. A magnet of the Colombian flag secured a picture of Nia and me grinning in the autumn sun while Kirby held a bucket of apples over their head like it was a UFC belt. It was the one few bits of evidence that I had friends. The evidence of that is sparse throughout this book. Beside it, a small grainy black and white photo of my great-grandma holding my infant grandmother on the shores of the Norwegian fjords. Fuck. So Marlo does not have any relationship with her family. She has no siblings. She has two parents who are evangelical Christians, particularly her mother, and she has two friends in the world who she doesn't really care about, but they certainly care about her, but she just sort of abandons them. You know, she just sort of like flies with the wind and just sort of bails on her friends whenever it's convenient for her. And she talks about how she abuses caffeine to keep her awake, and Caliban doesn't mind because he normally shows up in the night. Why does Caliban normally show up in the night? I'm not really sure. Why Caliban didn't just do everything he possibly could to convince her that he was in fact real, so we didn't spend the first 30% of this book with Marlo being like, he's a hallucination and I am hallucinating and I am mentally ill and that's very bad and that makes me very anxious. I'm not really sure because he is in fact a real entity, and I feel like being the Prince of Hell, he had enough power to do what he could to convince her of that and then just didn't, and I never really found out why he didn't. Okay, talking about her writing career, there were always new edits, rewrites, legal documents. I look over my emails, scan to see if there's anything important, clicked on the messages from Allison. She'd been my beta reader since my first Pantheon novel and exclusively sent love letters. I have a sneaking suspicion that Marlo would not take criticism well, so she only takes on beta readers that praise her. My mouth quirked up at the soliloquy regarding my brilliance and attention to detail and describing how she'd nearly kicked her dog by chucking her tablet across, killed her dog by chucking her tablet across the room after the plot twist. God, I am begging Hoopla to get dyslexia font because this is so difficult. I bit my lip at the dose of serotonin that coursed through me. It says that her friends are sending messages and she just basically clicks out of them without reading them. Further evidence that she is the world's shittiest friend. The Pantheon series wasn't going to write itself. I'd focused on a different world region for each of the novels. My debut had followed a Valkyrie as the protagonist. It had revolved around the Nordic gods, Valhalla, and the Viking Wars of the 1st century. It had taken the world by storm, debuting at number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list. Inkhouse had signed the series for 5 more books, giving me a king's ransom for an advance. The second book was a conflation of Greek and Roman gods and deities, a sequel that had outsold the novel 10-1. When asked what had led to the Pantheon's juggernaut success, I told them that my mythology novels had something that glittery vampires of yesteryear lacked: kinky, gratuitous sex. Good for her. I will say that something in this book that I particularly like is that when she does find out that the deities she's been writing about are all real and the pantheons are all existing, she finds out that her writing about them led, at least in the case of the Nordic gods, it led to more people being interested in them and leading to converts. Later on, the villain, who popped up at literally 70% through the book and was just underutilized as fuck, actually says to her that she wants to make a deal because she wants to be written about by Marlo, and that would cause her to have converts again and her name to be spoken again and her to be worshipped again. And I think that's a brilliant fucking idea. I think that this is sorely underutilized in this book, nonetheless a brilliant idea. I was now struggling through the 3rd installment. My main character was a Brazilian wilderness guardian on the cusp of colonization of the late 1500s, and my only editorial note was that I was coming on a little heavy-handed on my stance of deforestation. Eu prefiro morrer. I gotta send this to Lou. As much as I loved elementals and their lore, I struggled to connect to the lush jungles, sheer mountain ridges, and flooded lands near the Amazon. Perhaps I could convince my publisher to fund a trip to the rainforest and write amid the toucans and jaguars. Eu fico muito triste, She thinks about her friend Nia, who is married to a guy named Darius, and she's like, I kind of want what Nia has, but Nia says that no, I don't. I just have a case of grass is greener syndrome. I'd never met anyone else who was glad they tied the knot, but says she doesn't know many people. Some I know through social media, others through dates, and many through previous life as a lady of the evening. I just didn't like, speak with, or care about many. Trust me, it's clear. We have done barely anything in 2 chapters, but we have made abundantly clear that she does not care about people. She gets more texts from her friends. Please tell me you're leaving the house today. It's Nia. I'll never know what happens in Brazil. If you lose your mind to isolation. Marlo says, it isn't just Brazil. I'm doing a blender of South American lore.
Que Deus tenha misericórdia dessa nação.
And again, her friend Kirby talks to Nia as if Marlo isn't there, saying that Marlo ordering food just means she's ordering in. I don't know, the way they talk about her is just so weird. If this was my dynamic of friend, this is such a weird, it's just weird. And she explains that sometimes through food, sex, drugs, or rambling through the markets in a country where I didn't know the language for a few minutes, and sometimes even for a few days, I could pretend that I was someone different. I could let go of the chains that shackled me to the earth and disappear into a marvelous something. So she's alluding to the fact that her life has been super disruptive because all her life she has seen this guy. Previously she saw him as a fox, now she sees him as a man, and she is convinced that he is not real. Going back to talking about her career, I refuse to read anything worthwhile these days. Not only did I not want to compare myself to the greats, but nor did I want to risk being accused of idea theft, but I found that spite was my favorite motivator. Every terrible idiom, every clumsy sentence, every ill-conceived plot, and obnoxious main character highlighted ways in which I'd like to do things differently. Gandhi told us to be the change we want to see in the world. He was probably talking about kindness or charity or something, but I preferred to apply it to becoming the author I wish everyone else was. I tell you what, Marlo is not an author that I would go to a book signing for. Marlo seems like a nightmare to work with. We go back to talking about how her friends are always trying to mom her. She barely checks in with them. Her last relationship was with some woman named Eve. After a tearful breakup over the phone where Eve had demanded to know what she'd done wrong, I uselessly repeated that she was perfect. She called me a coward for breaking up the day before Valentine's Day, and she was probably right, but the holiday hadn't been the only motivator. I knew exactly who and what was sabotaging my life. My heart was spoken for as uselessly as if I'd fallen in love with a book character. If I couldn't step out of my own hyperphantasia, I'd never move on. It was 2:40 a.m. when I felt his presence. His weight shifted into the bed. The sheets shifted with his movements, just as they might with a flesh and blood partner. My heart skipped painfully. Bad day, love? I'm not your love, Caliban. You're not real, I whispered. If there's anything I could do to change your mind, I'd do it. Ask it of me. But you won't. We've been through this. I know you remember. I couldn't forget the last night I'd seen him, though I'd tried. So because this is not linear, I get very confused about like what's real and what's not. I'm not sure if that was the point. If it is, it didn't really make the impact that it was intending. If it's not, the impact that it made, still bad. I think that we should have just done this linear. I think that first of all, we needed to cut out all of this. I did not need to know anything about Marlo that we have given up till now has all been garbage. It just makes me hate her and feel really fucking bad for her friends and her fans and the people that she works with, like her agent. I feel so bad for, but it's also again just superfluous. It's not necessary. I didn't need to know it. What we could have been doing, and what I really wish we would have done, was establish the relationship timeline between her and Caliban from the jump. I wish that we'd started the book with her seeing him as a child, what she experienced when her mom found out that she was seeing this fox, and then later a man. It, I think, should have just been done linear. That would have made the greatest impact, and then we would have seen Marlo's mom from the jump and seen why she was so traumatized by her mom's religious beliefs, and it would have made more sense as to why Marlo feels like she is experiencing hallucinations, because it would have explained, like, in real time, well, this is what was drilled into her by her mom. There's no way this guy is real. So we flash back to, I think, the first time she met Caliban. Again, it got very convoluted and very confusing. I really wish we had spent more time with them getting to know each other, because by the end I'm just supposed to accept that they love each other, and I have no idea why they love each other. For him, he's known her through all the cycles of her life because she's reincarnated, and she just sees him, so she loves him? I don't know. Oh, it's not the first time it's the first time she saw him in adulthood, maybe? I don't know. She got super drunk and then he took care of her one night. Tonight I knew that looking at him would mean seeing resolute strength in the set of his jaw, that disappointment would pinch his brows, that there would be no smirk, no cavalier joking, no playful movements that would plant seeds within me, growing into a garden that blossomed only for him. Actually, that last one is really cute. Playful moments that would plant seeds within me, growing into a garden that blossomed only for him. Oh, that's really pretty. I like that, actually. I'd cried into his arms so hard I'd nearly thrown my back out. It's your fault, I'd sobbed through the whirlpool of coke and alcohol. You're not real. I can't keep playing this game. I need to get help. I can't be like my mom, like my grandma. I can't do this. I'm never going to be able to move forward with my life if I keep living in this fantasy. I don't want to be in love with you. And he just like doesn't say anything. And I'm like, well, why doesn't he just offer a way for him to just
prove that what are we doing? He just lets her believe she's crazy? Or like at least says like, well, I mean, I could prove it. Okay, how? Could I get an example? Could we maybe make a plan? That's the thing about Caliban, is that he never makes any plans. And that really annoys the shit out of me, especially towards the end when we're dealing with the big bad that shows up out of nowhere. He just sends her in to deal with it, no plan. And then when she comes back and she's like, I fucked up, I'm like, of course she fucked up. You guys didn't make a plan beforehand. What was the fucking point? Oh, that's right. At the time she said that he wasn't real and that she didn't want to see him again, so he only comes back like unseen. She had moved after that, tried to like change her life. You told me you weren't going to see me anymore, he says. You said nothing about staying away, and with everything going on, you're as much my escape as I am yours, love. Neither of us wants this to end. She doesn't ask, what do you mean with everything going on? I guess maybe you don't want to ask your hallucinations a question, but like that could lead to him proving that he's real. I just don't understand why we wrote it so wishy-washy. I won't have a shot at a normal life unless you're gone. You don't mean it. I do. Don't make a rash decision, love. Think about this. If you say, the visits, the sex, whatever it is we have, it has to stop. It's ruining my life. I'm losing my mind, Caliban. What's left of it anyway? Then it switches to saying that she has SSRI. Store-bought serotonin helped make the world a little bit more bearable, but only a little. I looked so put together on the outside. I paid my bills. I went to therapy. I brushed my hair. I didn't scream at strangers on the sidewalk. The world would never guess that my vivid imagination, one that had proved grossly profitable as an author, had slowly eroded me from the inside out as fantasy splashed over the cup, soaking my life. I like the visuals there, like fantasy splash over the cup, blah blah blah. Again, I'm just so confused why he doesn't just prove it. He says, can I make you a counter offer? And she says, I wonder how many times I've been locked in a heated debate with my burgeoning psychosis, speaking to empty shadows. I contemplated the wisdom of refusing to tell friends or therapists about him. Maybe I just didn't want to add a new set of pills to the tiny orange army that kept a vigilant watch over me. Maybe I didn't want to risk alienating my already dwindling friend group. I don't know, like all of this is just very confusing. And again, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be written that way. She's questioning her sanity. She's like, I'm crazy. And he says, then be crazy in my arms. What do you say? Do we have a deal? Chapter 3, she starts telling us about her life in sex work. As with most tales, this domino effect had tipped into my life quite by accident. It's a weird way to word that. Like, I get what we're going for, but I feel like that could have been worded better. She had taken a job to teach English as a second language in Medellin, Colombia. Sorry if I said that wrong. So it switches to December 23rd, age 22. She is traveling in South America on vacation from her job as a English teacher, and she runs into this girl who notices Marlo's tattoos on her hands. She has like a sun and moon tattoo on her hand fingers somewhere, and this girl is just super nice to her and then says, hey, I'm going back to Rio. I like your vibe, give me your cell phone. Come to Rio, hang out at my villa. A budget airline had me on a flight the next morning, leaving one of the most expensive cities on the continent and heading toward what would either be paradise or a story that ended with me waking up in a bathtub full of ice and missing a kidney. Woof. And so she meets these women, Taylor, Ivy, and Quinn, and they were escorts. They only worked with elite pre-screened clientele, and I didn't want to teach preschoolers. I didn't particularly want to talk to men either, but I did want to pay my bills. I wanted to be able to move out of the basement apartment, pay off my student loans, take vacations, escape the cycle of intergenerational poverty that had kept me under its thumb. I get that. Marlo grew up in a trailer. Bitch, same. I grew up in a trailer that had no water and no electricity. My sister and my brother slept on a table for a long time. And if we needed to cook something or to take a shower, we had to go next door to my grandparents' trailer, which did have water and electricity. And we lived there for years. So yeah, I get it. Unfortunately, that's where my ability to relate to Marlo ends. Well, that's not true. I also relate very much to her religious trauma with her mother, but we'll get there. Like, genuinely, I think that's like probably the best part of the book, and we will get there. Although I should, like, you don't have to relate to a character for a character to be good. I just think that Marlo is such a shitty person, and I don't care what happens to her because, again, she's such a shitty person to other people. So these women that she meets help her set up a covert profile, pick a new name, book her first client, a weekend scheduled for the end of the month in South America with a guy. Taylor connected her with a few of her old patrons whose schedules conflicted with Taylor's. Community over competition. Somebody else I know who read this felt like this was just a very idealized portrayal of sex work. My biggest issue with it isn't so much the idealized thing, it's that she just stumbled into it. Like, she just happened to meet this girl who also did sex work, did escorting, and then it just like all falls in her lap, and that was it. The first day in Brazil.
Brasil!
It was a beautiful, confusing, colorful, dazzling dream. We'd eaten fruit, drank pitchers of sangria, relaxed, and genuinely laughed. Taylor was right. Her life was a party, but it wasn't the drugs and rave music and bandage-tight dresses that I pictured when envisioning a party. It was relaxation. And Caliban sees her one night while she's, in Brazil and says, starting a new career, are we? Teaching English was always temporary. I've just shortened it by half a year. Why? Are you showing up as my conscience? He says, never. Whatever makes you happy. I know that struggling to pay the bills does not make you happy, but I've said it before. If you'd let me help with that. She says, yes, you can help by making sure I book only the richest clients and make the most money so that my boat sets sail on an endless sea of cash by this time next year. And I'm like, but can you ask that of him and then he can do it and then prove that he's real? Like, why aren't we doing that? I'm so confused. And then she talks about her first client and it went fine. She watched TV while he was having sex with her. This was so much better than disappointing lays with broke one-night stands. My overcorrection from an upbringing in purity culture meant that virtue had never meant much to me. If I wasn't going to raise my standards, I should at least be getting something out of it. Fair enough. And then chapter 4 is literally just like one page where it says all this stuff that Marlo went through. Living dollar to dollar. The struggle of adjusting between medicines, religious parents, stress of college, toils and failures of first job out of school. Those were the reasons that my heart was unavailable. It had nothing to do with Caliban, essentially. And I'm like, okay, we did not need that chapter. We could have... This is over 500 pages. We could have nixed that. All of that was implied. We've already been doing that shit for the last 3 chapters. We don't need it. Chapter 5, it explains that he, was like really supportive in the late nights of her writing her first book, and she was querying, and she finally got picked up and she was very excited about it. She says she wants to celebrate with him, and it says, what a sensation to know someone well enough to hear the cadence of their silence when he doesn't say something. And I thought that was a really great sentence, so I highlighted it. So back in what I think is the present, because again, we're jumping around and it gets very confusing. I have a hard time. I don't even remember what age she is from page to page. And again, so much of this is superfluous. She's at a book signing and somebody says Maribel, and remember her name is Marlo. However, her author name is, what is it again? Merritt Finnegan. And somebody at her author signing, where people should be calling her Merritt, calls her Maribel, which is the name she used when she was escorting. And she recognizes the guy yelling the name Maribel at her, and it's this guy, what's his name? Richard. I was gonna say Robert. Wrong author name. I pinked at the long dead name, eyes shooting to her agent, who was already searching my face for answers. My lips pursed into a tight line. My look communicated 2 simple words, help me. This man was shouting my escorting alias for the world to hear, and as she's signing it says, the girl in line fidgeted nervously at my obvious discomfort, and I winced as I misspelled her name in the signing. I doodled a butterfly and apologized profusely for my blunder, and then like 2 seconds later it says, he left quietly and apologized, her agent said. I think he understood his blunder. Why did we use blunder after blunder? Would you like me to put security on him? So when she goes home, she sees that the front desk, which is normally manned by a woman, is empty. It had never been left unattended before. My steps slowed as I stretched out my intuition, allowing its instinctual fingers to prod the space around me. And I was like, oh, she has magic powers? No, it was just randomly thrown in here. I'm like, wait, what? Ah, damn. Fuck. So confusing. I stopped, a sliver of adrenaline piercing me like a needle. She calls her friend Kirby because she's scared, talks to Kirby for a while. Kirby is a veterinary surgeon, which never comes up again. And she's like, oh, I just wanted to call because I was scared. She gets off the phone and Richard's in her apartment. So that didn't work out. Maribel, he repeated coldly, or should I call you Merritt or Marlo? He'd made one seemingly innocent comment within the first hour of when they first met that I'd been unable to shake. Even 2 years later after the date, the minor exchange sent a shudder down my spine. The date had been utterly standard until he mentioned in passing that his childhood home had burned down. I'd frowned and reached across the table to touch his hand, apologizing for his loss. I had perfected the empathetic pout and loved the opportunity to use it. Endearing exchanges like this generally earned me several hundred in tips. I'm so sorry you went through that, I said. I'm not, he responded, a distant twinkle in his eye. The McDonald triad was what all the true crime podcasts I listened to while cleaning my house or wasting time on a plane had called it. The triad was composed of 3 ingredients: cruelty to animals, bedwetting, and arson. And so because he said that, she's like, oh, he seems like a serial killer. And so that was why she ended the date, and then years later, here he is again, and now he's in her apartment. I'm just gonna refer back to Jules, who knows more about this stuff than me. The McDonald triad as a predictor of violence gives me the ick. It's very related to science for sociopathy and has been debunked by some experts. So that's what Jules said about the McDonald triad. Again, I'm just referring to people who know more than me because I don't really have an opinion myself, but I thought I'd give give you an opinion of somebody who has a bachelor's in psychology. Wow, I just got a text from Natalie and she was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, filming this fucking probably 4-hour long ass video. And she's like, oh yeah, how many energy drinks have you had so far? I cannot believe you would ask me that. This video is gonna be so fucking long, help me. Okay, so she had ended the date, all right? And then she never like rescheduled with him. And so then she asks, you know, where's the receptionist? He says out, so clearly he killed the receptionist. And she tries to like manipulate him into not killing her. You look good. How have things been in the surgical wards? He says, oh, you know, cutting and dicing, slashing and hacking, this and that. So yikes, that bodes well. Do you know that little bookstore on Main Street? The one that always hangs those pride flags in the window? So assumedly this is said to be like vitriolic, and of course like he's a bad guy, so we just also made him homophobic. Guess whose smile I saw? Merritt Finnegan, best-selling author of the Pantheon series, followed by the grinning face of the prostitute who stood me up. I just had to see it for myself. It should have been the least of my worries, but a small part of me died at the word. No one shouted your alias for the world to hear with camaraderie on the brain. No one referred to sex workers as prostitutes unless they swung to hurt. Maribel, Merritt Finnegans, Finnegans? They were both lies. You're not real. Nothing about you is real. Then it occurred to me that it didn't matter whether you're a whore, you were still a liar, Marlo Thorson. My full name, the final chilling nail in the coffin. He lunges at her, he attacks her, he tries to kill her. My last thought before unconsciousness began to pull me under rang through my mind as clear as a bell. Be sure to get skin under your fingernails so they can avenge your death. Yeah, that's probably the last thought I would have too. She sees a sparkle in the next chapter, and she's like, what the fuck am I seeing? Is this oxygen deprivation? The rippling shape of a man stood just behind where Richard had only been moments prior. The man's hand remained outstretched, frozen, as if he'd left it where Richard's head was meant to be. She tries to ask, who are you? And it says, as he moved, I was hit by a scent like the thieves' oil my mother used to smudge on my temples when I was sick. Frankincense and myrrh, bright and overpowering spices. I'm so sorry, you have mentioned one of my special interests. Let me go get mine. This is thieves' oil. I have long been obsessed with thieves' oil. Okay, it's a problem. There's like a fake story about like how this came to be, where it's like thieves back in the day of the bubonic plague. The reason it got its name was because back in the days of the bubonic plague, thieves would put the oils of lemon, cinnamon, clove, eucalyptus, and rosemary over their masks when they would rob the homes of the dead. It's a made-up story. It's not real. However, back in the day when I was a crunchy granola mom, I believed that it was real, and my obsession with this stuff has remained. However, I have to tell you that there is no thieves' oil that contains frankincense and myrrh. Specifically, frankincense and myrrh are very perfumey. I'm sorry. Essential oils are a special interest. I'm sorry. Or at least they used to be, and like this is all I have left over is like my obsession with peppermint and thieves. So there is no frankincense or myrrh in thieves' oil. And this comes up throughout the book and I'm like, why are we putting oils inside of thieves' oil that don't go into thieves' oil? Thieves' oil is always lemon, eucalyptus, rosemary, clove, and cinnamon, and it smells like fucking Christmas, and oh my god, I'm obsessed. I literally rub it on my gums when I get sick. I diffuse it when my kids have like a stuffy nose. I'm obsessed with thieves' oil. That's why it's literally always in my house. Anyway, all this to say, there is no frankincense and myrrh in thieves' oil. Frankincense and myrrh are very perfumey. Too much of them gives me like an instant migraine. I don't diffuse them in my house, but if you come to my house, you will smell thieves' oil, and it's because it's always running. In fact, is my diffuser next to me? No, it's not. Sorry, you brought up one of my special interests. I had to. So apparently he smells like thieves' oil that isn't thieves' oil because he smells like frankincense and myrrh. So he smells like the real story of Christmas, whereas thieves' oil smells like the Christmas that you and I know. Wait, ew, did I just say the real story of Christmas? Oh my god. Oh my god. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know how that is still left over from Funnyland. Wow, I am embarrassed. I am truly embarrassed by that. The real story of Christmas. Rachel! I have to leave it in for accountability. Oh my god. That is so sad. We're gonna move on. The real story of Christmas. Yike! So she's like, who are you? And he's like, how can you see me? This is just a dream, he says unconvincingly. He's like, you can't see me. She's like, the fuck I can't. What did you do to him? He was marked, the stranger said. I had him choke on his tongue. I shouldn't be telling you this. You shouldn't be asking. Who the hell are you? She says. Are those your sigils? He says. My heart thundering, adrenaline overpowered me. What sigils? Did you put them up, human? Did you put them up? He's He's like, forget about tonight, call the police, man died while attacking you. It isn't even self-defense. Not really. You won't get in any trouble. It isn't even self-defense. Then wouldn't she get in trouble? I don't know who's visiting you, and who should pop up but Demon Daddy Caliban. And he says to the guy, Silas, which is the guy's name, and Silas is like, shit, thank you for taking care of my mark. Your mark? If these are your sigils, I didn't mean to interfere. I was just telling the human. And he says, this is your human? And Caliban says to him, I owe you silence. What? Silence? Silas. Caliban somehow takes care of the body. Silas leaves. She asks Caliban, where have you been? Because apparently she hasn't seen him in a long time. You almost died, he said. What happened? Who was that man Silas? Not who, what? I've marked all of those who have wronged you. Consider me protective. I can't control who answers the marks. Why did Silas come? I did what I had to do, Caliban says. Couldn't you have helped me? No. By the gods, I wish I could have. I would have done so much more than make that slug suffocate on his tongue. He called him a slug. I would have needed him to suffer to beg your forgiveness before I gave him the execution he deserved, but you and I made a binding deal that I'm forced to honor until your last breath. I can't do anything in your home without your consent. Why can I see you now after all these years? You said I couldn't see you again. No, you said you didn't want to see me again. It's a gray area and one I'm taking advantage of right now. There is an absence of want in the moment of death. Rules are every bit as important as their loopholes. Again, all of this is very confusing. And she's like, you were there, you were gonna let me die. And he's like, you just don't understand the absolution of agreements. You don't understand verbal contracts. And I'm like, well, why didn't you guys have a conversation about verbal contracts so that she knows that there are consequences to what she says? You've been visiting her for literally years. What have you guys been talking about? Why are you in love with each other? What do you speak about? Or do you just have the same conversation over and over about Marlo being like, I'm hallucinating you, and you being like, no, you're not, but you don't believe me. Let's have sex. Is that it? Boo, boring. Humans have nothing like the sovereignty of binding contracts in your realm. They're oaths, Marlo, and that transcends time and place. Silas saved me. That stranger saved me, not you. And he's like, okay, then give me free reign in your home. Let me enter your life. If it's what you want, open it up to me. And she tells him to get out. He says, if you want me, then you're going to have to say so. She says, fuck that. Get out, Caliban. Get out and don't come back. He says, don't give commands out of anger. For the love of gods, I wish I could explain to you. And I'm like, I'm not really sure why you can't explain anything to her. There's nothing left to explain. You would have let me die. Leave and don't come back. I've wanted freedom from this for 20 years. I mean it, Caliban, don't come back. You've told me before, and I know I need to listen, even if you're one hell of a habit to break. A life with me isn't what you want. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you in the way that you needed me, he says, and he's gone. She decides to look into the supernatural, which why she didn't do this years prior, I have no fucking clue. Why he didn't encourage her to do it years prior, also no fucking clue. She goes and talks to a librarian. If I say sigil, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? If you're looking for resources on sigil, have you talked to any practitioners? Sigils could be about anything: wards, deities, angels, demons. I shuddered at a few of the words in her list. My religious upbringing triggered an unintentional flinch at the thought of fire and brimstone sermons on angels and demons. I wondered if she could count the creases in my forehead as my confusion intensified. You should be looking within the witch community. They might have more resources than our library. Witches? I repeated, struggling not to make a smart-ass comment about Halloween. At least she hadn't suggested I speak to a priest. I generally could prefer to keep my research academic. You can't study something while looking your nose down at it. She had a point and I was desperate. This is a little heavy-handed, but alright. So she starts Zoom calling practitioners. She talks to one and she says to them, I'm reaching out because I need advice on how to see something, and the practitioner tells her, okay, I'm going to give you a list of instructions, you're going to do them, and this will help you improve your clair abilities, your like ability to see things. And so she does them and they don't work. All of this I felt was, again, superfluous detail. We could have just erased all of this shit. It was just too much stuff going on. Sometime after this, she's hanging out with her friends, which is the only time that this happens, and she sees on the TV the guy who Silas, the guy who showed up in her apartment, killed. The former client of hers, Richard, the dead guy, he's on the news. I mean, they're talking about him on the news. Wow, that was about as well put together as the beginning of this book, Rachel. So they say that they're looking into Richard's disappearance, and she's like telling her friend, write down that address, write down that address. She's like, I knew that guy. Nia says, from where? And while Nia knows about her previous line of work in escorting, she doesn't feel comfortable talking about it in front of Nia's husband, Darius. He was a good man, one of the few I tolerated, particularly now that I considered him my brother-in-law. If this is what she considers like to be a sister, she treats her sister like shit. Nia Foster had forced her way into my life like a bulldozer, and I'd let her. She'd seen my rather public fallout with my family in the wake of the first Pantheon book. My mother's novel-length rejection of my blasphemous lifestyle and romanticization of heathen gods on her publicly available social account had made the news. But as P.T. Barnum once said, there's no such thing as bad publicity. My fuck-ups had captured an audience, whether prospective book buyers, opinionated pundits, or the online community who I'd come to love and know as friends. Nia had sent me a direct message informing me that she was my sister now. So she is friends with this person because she just messaged her a bunch of times, Nia did, until Marlo finally gave in one night while super upset and decided to allow this person who just like made this friendship happen. She just sort of like is like, okay, I'll talk about my problems to you. And it said, she'd become my family. You are the world's worst family member to her. My God. Why do you need the address? I just do. Great. She finally starts to see the sigil. She finally cracks it. In the absence of crystals and tarot readings and the Prime Creator, I'd meditated and failed spectacularly. I couldn't clear my thoughts. I couldn't focus. With inexplicable tenacity, tinged with desperation for something to work, I attempted every day for nearly an hour until one day I opened my eyes and there it was. It had stolen my breath. She sees the sigils. She then goes to the house of the man who tried to kill her. Why? I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. She goes in. She's immediately afraid. And so she ends up in his basement and there's a set of rooms that she then gets locked into. Like it's an auto locking thing. And in this basement, she is not alone. There is a Cheshire cat smile on an inhumane child. Inhumane? What? The pale face, the too wide Cheshire cat smile of an inhumane child. I think that's supposed to be inhuman. Oh, there's a lot of typos that I'm noticing now. 4 feet tall, wayfish thin, and in little more than a potato sack stood a terrible, beautiful ghoul. He positively sparkled as he said, "My, don't humans say the funniest things." He positively sparkled. Interesting. "You smell delicious. What does it smell? So good, so good. What a flavor, what a flavor." He was real. So you believe that this dude's real immediately, but you didn't believe that that dude who you were having sex with for years in the night was real? I'm so confused. "Call us Legion, for we are many. You're just our type. How kind that my host sent a treat even in death." The boy lunged. I lowered my hands the moment the blinding passed and saw a tall muscle figure standing just above the drain in the center of the basement. My eyes widened with recognition. We locked eyes for a horrified moment. "Silas?" I gasped. "You can't be fucking serious." I'm feeling the same way because again, she just sort of like stumbles into other people doing stuff for her again and again and again, even with sex work and now twice with Silas. And honestly, that's how the book ends as well. She's like, "Can you help me get out?" He kills the inhumane child. "I shouldn't be talking to you. You're not my human." "I'm no one's human. I'm alone and locked in a basement, and whether you like it or not, I can see you. For the love of God, you have to help me." She's like, "If you leave me here, then I'm going to die. Nobody knows that I'm here, and I don't have a phone, like, signal to get out." And she says, "My name is Marlo." And he's like, "Oh, you're so stupid. You let yourself into a parasite-infested basement, and you give out your name. It explains why you allowed a sigil to be painted above your door without even realizing it was there." She's like, "You can't let me die." And she's like, "I came looking for Caliban." Why did you come here looking for Caliban? Why would Caliban be in this dude's basement? Or for you, or for something, or for anything. Well, you found something. Good for you. "Silas, please. Caliban hasn't visited me in months. Summer is almost over and I don't know what to do." Wait, what happens at the end of summer? What does that have to do with anything? "I came looking for a way to find him. I had no leads except that Caliban said he'd marked Richard, the man you killed in my apartment. This is his house. You said Richard was marked. Is that why you're here for this child?" Silas says, "The parasite had nothing to do while people stopped coming to the basement. When I killed the host, it released the..." Wait, it's so easy to forget you shouldn't be talking to me. "It's your fault the parasite showed up anyway. Use your cell phone. You'll be dead within a month if you keep throwing your name around. Good luck with your life." And she's like, "I don't have reception. You have to get me out of here. There's a bond that happens when one of us takes in a human. It's a permanent decision on both ends. I don't want to be responsible for you in this lifetime or the next. If you get into trouble, it would be my fault. And clearly, Marlo, you would get in trouble." So he thinks about it and he says, "I suppose it wouldn't hurt for Caliban to owe me 2 favors. So he gets her out and she also says, "Okay, will you also help me see through the veil?" And he's like, "Not a chance. Do us both a favor and never see me again." Now, Silas initially was a cool idea and then it flip-flopped a few times, like what we were doing with him. It was very confusing. Not as confusing as what the fuck is going on with Caliban, not just telling her or like making a plan with her or giving her literally any information that would, you know, cease her fears that she is unraveling. Silas goes from like him not wanting to even save her life to sort of, I think, being into her randomly for like one scene, and then also like begging her to make a bond with him, I think after he goes and talks to the Christian god, because Silas is an angel, and then by the end he's like helping her, saving her. And I'm like, this is just so blip-floppy. The only person who stayed the same from beginning to end is Fauna, who we're about to meet. And Silas had told her, you need to ask Caliban to lift the veil. Well, then when she gets home, Silas is there. The guy who just told her, hey, don't ever see me again, and I don't even want to save your life, is now at her house. And he says, I'll do it, the veil. And she's like, but the bond you said. He's like, I had time to think and I changed my mind. How much time? He says, do you want it or not? And then from the shadows came the coo of an airy female voice. I made out the subtle hourglass edges of hips and legs as she stepped into view. Her musical words were laden with an unmistakable smile as she said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Silas dropped his hand and said, ah, for fuck's sake. Chapter 11. She's one of ours. I know you can smell it on her. Silas says, barely. It has to be what, an eighth? And they're talking about the fact that Marlo is Fae. She is Nordic Fae. It's enough, the woman said. I'm sorry we had to meet this way. Cute place, by the way. I'm Fauna. Marlo says, who the fuck are you people? I feel like you can just infer at this point, but Marlo's not very good at that. Marlo's just not very smart in general. Fauna's icy white hair was divided by a block of copper. Her pale skin was smattered with freckles of both ginger and pearl. She looked like a baby deer. So this is the deer of the title, right? The dragon, I think that it was just sort of hinting at the devil, who does come up for one scene and not a very important scene. Like that scene could have been an email. I think that the title is like, it's very aesthetic, but it's not very practical. So if you're wondering who the dragon is, it's nobody. And if you're wondering who's on the cover, I have no fucking clue who that is. It's a great cover. I just have genuinely no fucking clue which character this is supposed to be. Fauna says, let me tell you this story. Silas here went back to his overlord after your little encounter. Oh, you didn't think we know already? Don't be thick. Anyway, his power-hungry divine was thrilled to hear that such a curious human wanted to bond to his special angel. It would have been so convenient to have the prince's favorite plaything bound to you. Your master would have loved that. Take the time you need to lick your wounds. We applaud the effort, but she's ours. He says we have a claim to her. So this is like, I can tell what's going on here, but for some reason Marlo is just like not very astute. We have a claim to her. Clearly this is an angel. He belongs to the Christian God. So they're probably talking about her having grown up in the church and being baptized. And Fauna says blood is thicker than empty wishes, which is actually really funny. We have a claim from infancy. She was dedicated. Your master makes such a fuss about free will, but sends out his little slaves to make more little slaves and have newborns undergo ceremonies or splash some water or sign life debt contracts for him long before they know their own name. She made no such dedication. And he's like, she didn't have to as a baby. And Fauna's like, shush, give it a rest. So this is interesting because like in certain sects of Fundyland, it's true that they baptize as babies. However, the sect that I grew up in is like dedicated to the idea that you are doing this of your free will, and they don't let you get baptized until you're old enough to make that choice. Now technically I was baptized twice because I made that choice twice, and then I fell away, and then when I got baptized when I was 7, and then also I got baptized at probably 12 again, and it's like this big choice. They don't do baptism as babies in the sect of Fundyland that I grew up in, because they do again want to convince you that it is about your free will and it is a choice that you must make. And they also don't believe that even if you've been baptized, that you are forever baptized. You have to continuously make that choice to serve Christ and live your life for him day after day. So essentially your free will could render your baptism meaningless. Silas tells Fauna, tread lightly, I don't think the Nords want to get involved, it's not your war. And then tells Marlo, you wanted to see beyond the veil, I can do that. You want powerful angelic allies, I can offer that. And Fauna tells Silas to get lost. Thieves oil and sea spray, masculine and feminine, frankincense and pine. It's not frankincense. They were glitter and glow, sandwiched between the kitchen appliances and the electronics of my very human living room. Let me take you into this, Marlo. You'll enter the veil with a substantially higher ranking, he says. Access you can't even imagine. You don't know what you're giving up if, and Fauna's like, hush, go away. So Fauna tells her, oh, okay, you have sigils here. I'm guessing that that's from the prince. Marlo says, the prince? And I don't remember at any point them directly saying to her, Caliban, the guy you've been seeing, is the prince of hell. It's just sort of like one moment she's asking the prince and the next moment it's accepted that he's the prince of hell, but we never did the bridging of that gap. She explains, I'm Fauna, and asks, what did you study again? Was she asking me about my college major? major? Apparently so. Double major, literature and linguistics with concentrations in Spanish and Nordic studies. Isn't it lovely how the blood calls to you? Here you are in the godforsaken American Midwest, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but your mother gave up her language, right? And she's like, I don't know how Fauna would know about my mother. I wasn't about to win a Pulitzer for my journalism anytime soon, as I couldn't even form a coherent thought beyond reverting to denial. Okay, that's a sentence. I'm sure the things your mother thought and felt were very scary for her. Generally, we leave humans with distant fae blood to their own devices, unless of course some angelic asshole is trying to bond with a Nord just to fuck with the prince. And Marlo's like, are you saying you're fae? She's like, me, Silas, the prince, we're all preternatural. And she explains she's sort of like a nymph. And she's like, how do you afford a place this nice? What did you do with a literature degree that affords a place like this? And Marlo says, well, I write books. I wrote the Pantheon series. And Fauna's like, well, we know that you write. I just didn't know that it paid this well. I read the first one mostly to see if you mentioned, and equally disappointed that I was not your main character. And she's like, oh, money, jobs, the sex work. We know about that, Peanut. Congratulations, by the way. There isn't a deity alive who doesn't use sex as a form of worship. Oh, no, I'm wrong. Silas's owner has very particular ideas about sex. I wonder if that's why all of his angels have sticks up their asses. They need to get laid. We're laying it on a little thick with like the tongue in cheek, but I think it gets better. Fauna is my favorite in this entire book. You nearly bowed yourself to an angel so that you could see beyond the veil. Are we bonding or what? There it was again. That miserable lightning bolt through my core at the use of the word angel. Years of fists on pulpits, fear of eternal damnation, of verses in pews and water and communion made me recoil. I realized it wasn't that I wanted her to be fake. I'd been willing to accept hidden people and folktales. I was ready for witches, but the church-heavy language had triggered something within me. Honestly, I can't relate to this in particular because, so this book doesn't use the term spiritual warfare, which is how I was brought up to understand. Like Marlo's mom's beliefs are called spiritual warfare in my sect of Christian evangelical Fundyland. This book doesn't use that term, so I don't know. I guess Marlo grew up in a different sect, which is pretty normal. I was on the, like my dad used to work for Jimmy Swagger and Rod Parsley, so they're pretty heavy on like the use of the term spiritual warfare. In Assemblies of God churches in particular, which is what I grew up in, they, you know, use the term spiritual warfare. And if I were to find an angel in my room, it wouldn't freak me out? Dang, that's a really good question to ask myself. I don't think that I would feel sick if an angel were in my room, because if an angel were in my room, then it would prove that they were right. And oh man, I don't know actually. But the use of the term angel in particular would not freak me out. If angels were real, did that mean my mother had been right about everything? I don't know, because I think that I would feel like, okay, well then there's like reasonability here and I could like reasonably talk to these people and I don't feel so sick about it. But like the thing that my upbringing instilled in me was like the lack of seeing it instilled so much more fear. Seeing it I think would instill less. I don't know if that makes sense. Everybody's experience with Fundyland is so different. She offers to like bond with Marlo to lift the veil and Marlo needs to think about it. She takes a shower. Fauna says, let's talk about your true sight. It's in your blood of course, but when combined with this sigil, I'm just fascinated it worked on you even while out of the house. And Marlo still doesn't believe that any of this is real. She says, I'm batshit. Mental illness runs in my family. On my mom's side, we're all nuts. And Fauna explains, well, your mom's just one of us. But actually, your great-grandmother, Aloisa, she hooked up with a fae guy who's still around. And that's why you have fae blood. Thinking about her mother, it says, John and Lisbeth Thorson, the model Christian couple, pillars of the church, a woman as rigid as the ruler of judgment by which she measured the world around her, and a man as absent and forgettable as the John Does who shared his name. My mother wasn't quite Margaret White, but she had several qualities that would have made Carrie fans proud. My mom is obsessed with angels and demons. She's schizophrenic, Fauna. She saw and heard things that weren't there. Eventually she stopped talking about it. She had to. Do you know how many jobs are taken off the table when you're diagnosed? Do you know how stigmatized it is? I couldn't risk getting slapped with that label. Didn't want the world to close down for me like it did for her and my grandma. So I did ask Jules about this, and Jules's response was to ask what jobs get taken away when diagnosed with schizophrenia, because jobs don't have a right to your diagnoses. Also, she's been going to psychiatrists and therapists, but how isn't she diagnosed? I hate the idea that all schizophrenia is seen through a veil. That is a harmful concept to spread. Honestly, delusions are common with schizophrenia, and people with it have problems telling fact from delusion. The idea that it's all real is just a dangerous thing to toss into a book. I'm not sure if the book is actually saying that all schizophrenia is just people seeing behind the veil or not, but I do understand that when we're throwing around diagnoses like that, we have to be exceedingly careful. And Fauna says, well, the voices in your head never told your mom to hurt herself or others. She was was just seeing things. Schizophrenia is real just as clairvoyance is real. Seeing through the veil can be wonderful or it can ruin your life. The best way to tell whether you're clairsentient is the message coming from the other side. Unless she had a parasite. Well, a parasite would tell her to do terrible things. You would know. You met one of those creepy little fuckers, but it sounds like you're all suffering from a terrible case of great-grandma Aloisa getting knocked up by the Fae. My mom, you're saying she was just seeing through the veil? Poor clairsentient humans. And Fauna asks, why did you choose to call the prince Caliban? And it's from The Tempest. The character was the son of a witch, and Caliban always seems so magical. Shakespeare tracks for someone with a degree in literature. You did well. We don't give out our real names, though. If people are astute, they can sometimes guess the outer edges of our names. Like you choosing Caliban, important, magical. The character was half monster in human shape, right? It's a good name. It shows your insight. In fact, I suspect it's why you've lived by your many aliases, but at the end of the day, it isn't just for safety and anonymity, it's because some part of you knows that names have power. She explains that her grandmother Dagny, which her name meant New Day, had suffered from terrible agoraphobia. Oh man, I as well. And she felt like all of their mental illness came from Grandma Dagny. And then she asked, are any of us actually crazy? Fauna says, all of you probably. I can't imagine what it does to the human brain to have Fae blood pumping through your veins. And to be, oh, what's the word? Come on. It's a really good one that you humans started using. What is it when you know something is true but you're told over and over that you've lost your mind? Gaslit? Gaslit! Fauna echoed enthusiastically, clapping her hands together. Such a good word. It's overused though. At this pace, it'll be devoid of meaning within the year. Oh boy. Okay. Certain questions are being asked and like certainly Fauna is dumping some info in our lap, but I just get really frustrated when a main character does not ask the most obvious, most basic questions to ask in that moment. This is happening here. And I kept thinking, okay, in the next chapter, she's going to ask the basic questions and then she doesn't. And I'm like, okay, in the next chapter, she's definitely going to ask and then she doesn't. Her and Fauna the next morning decide to go get coffee about town. And then she checks her phone and she realizes that her friends have been trying to get a hold of her and she forgot about them, as Marlo does, because Marlo is the worst fucking friend on the planet. At what point do I call the police? Is it now? Do I call them now? Nia says. So she texts Nia and says, sorry, I met up with an old friend and I lost track of time. And Nia says, liar, we both know you don't have any friends. And I'm like, well, yeah, who would want to be friends with this person who forgets about all of her friends? She is basically the sun and all of her friends just revolve around her. I wouldn't want to be friends with her either. Of course she doesn't have any friends. So then she takes a picture with her and Fauna, sends it to Nia, and Nia's like, oh, it's a hot friend. Okay, never mind, go be happy. Fauna gives her some more information, however, again, she's not asking the most pertinent question, and then she tells her, I need a minute, so can you go away for a little bit? And so Fauna leaves for a bit, and she decided to go get a tattoo. She gets this, like, true sight sigil tattooed on her body. Well, she just goes to a tattoo artist and gets it tattooed on her so that she can see things. And the guy doing the tattoo says, is this from the Wizard movie? What? Movie? I closed my eyes in a soft chuckle, making the on-the-spot decision as to whether or not now was the time to grandstand about ethical consumption of media. It's not. It's not. We didn't even need to put that in there, actually. She goes back to Fauna, shows her the tattoo, and Fauna's like, maybe you're not such a dumbass after all. I mean, if it was that good of an idea, why didn't you suggest it? Marlo asks, will this work to lift the veil without the bond? And Fauna says, a true sight sigil still won't let you jump realms, so when it comes to seeing things humans shouldn't, there's only one way to know. Do you want to test it out? So they leave again. Her friend Kirby calls Marlo and is like, what the fuck is going on? Fauna answers and she's like, oh my god, this person on your phone is so hot. Fauna is obsessed with eating sweets, so she asks Kirby, can you send me the address for a bakery? And says, Kirby, what a quirky name. It's one I've not heard before and I do love names. Marlo says, it's not their real name. Fauna says, chosen names are the only ones I accept. That was kind of weird. I mean, like, it is their real name. Kirby's non-binary, and that's the name they chose for themselves. I don't know. I just thought that was weird. So after they get off the phone with Kirby, they have this conversation about Kirby that I don't know why we needed to have, because Kirby doesn't really show up. In fact, we never see Kirby in person again at all. Do we ever see Kirby in person? Again, Kirby just exists to revolve around Marlo. How did they come across the name Kirby? The only Kirby I've heard of was that round cutie from the show or the game, you know, the human game. Ah, do I ever. Kirby's Avalanche was the game of my childhood. I smiled sadly at the memory. Yeah, that's why they got their name. It's kind of a weird story. Are you sure you want to hear it? It was my 11th birthday. Only 10 kids in my class showed up. This girl, Nancy, got me a present, but when she opened it, she decided she wanted it. I told her she'd given it to me for my birthday and she couldn't have it back. It was mine. Fauna says, sounds like Nancy was a little bitch. I feel like this book hates children. I certainly feel like Marlo hates children. By the end of the book, I was like, Marlo's the kind of person who would be on a plane, and if there's like a parent who's sitting with their baby, and like one time I had to travel to back from California back to Florida for a funeral, and my baby was colicky, and I could tell like other people were on the plane getting upset, and I'm like, I'm so sorry that I have to fly back to fucking Florida because somebody's dead, and my baby that I couldn't leave at home has colic. My fucking bad. But of course, like, they're just adults who hate children, and like Marlo feels very much that way, and it's just another thing that is just like making her a shitty person to me. It's fine to not want kids for yourself, but just to like despise children for being children, like by virtue of being children, like, sorry that they're at a particular stage in development that bothers you, and you, an adult, can't decide to manage your own expectations, manage your own emotions. Sorry, but by the end of this book, I was really fucking sick of the way that Marlo talked about children. It just felt like, could you call that ageism? Like, it almost felt like ageism. But apparently, her telling Nancy that she wanted the toy was enough to result in her dad spanking her for being selfish, and the rest of them got so upset, the kids at the party got so upset that they called their parents to come get them. Why we needed to know any of this, I have no idea. Kirby was the only one who stayed. They brought their gaming system to the party, and we played that cartoon fighting game. I kicked their butt as 10 different characters, as the princess, as the fox, as the spaceman, almost all of them. They chose the Kirby character over and over. The next day they called the house, and my mom picked up and she said that Kirby was calling. Their nickname stuck. We ended up dating a little in high school, swapped V cards and all that, but it's better this way. We're more than friends now, we're family. Again though, Marlo doesn't know how to be family. Marlo is a piece of shit to everybody except for Caliban. No, even to Caliban, but you know, she doesn't think Caliban is real. But even when she does think people are real, they revolve around her like she's the sun, and she just treats everybody like shit. Fauna says, of course your best friend is an ex. I love queer culture. So they go to a shop run by a woman named Betty. Fauna says, Betty, I need a favor. I'm looking for someone. Marlo says, a friend. No, he was more than that. He is so much more than that. And I asked him not to come back, and I need to undo it. I didn't believe he was real when I said what I said. Not truly. Betty says, it's a mistake you'll have to learn from. Marlo, names, commands, promises. They have power that those of us having a mortal experience don't understand. Humans aren't like Fae. We can lie. We can break our word. We don't need consent. Some suggest that the human kingdom is the true hell, and I often wonder if they're right. Fauna asks Betty, are you still working with Ezramus? Betty says, of course I am. It's better in this lifetime than ever before. Business is abundant. And she explains that Betty is a witch and one of the few that works with a demon. Betty explains that she in particular helps women, mostly women who are in abusive relationships. The woman is set free. I pay my bills, and Ezramus, the demon, gets the victory of absorbing malevolence. And then she asks Fauna asks Betty, would Ezramus be willing to help us find Marlo's prince? Which is a weird thing for Fauna to be asking, because later on, way later, I don't know. The timeline of this book is very odd. Later on, you find out that Fauna and Ezramus are together. They've been together for like a really long time. It's just that Fauna doesn't like to be tied down. Well, she doesn't like to be, she doesn't like to stick around. So like, who would know best if Ezramus is going to want to help than Fauna? I don't really understand. It would have made more sense if they'd gone to Betty and Fauna said, I want you to call Ezramus and we can ask him, are you willing to help us find Marlo's prince? Do you have the time? Because Ezramus shows up and he's like, I will literally do anything for Fauna. I fucking love Fauna. So they do this ritual thing, and a young man scarcely older than Fauna tucked his hands into his pockets at the far end of the space. I could have sworn that the beautiful male was in monochromatic shades of black, white, and gray. He wore a black jacket rolled up at the forearms with a thin white shirt underneath, and he has 2 obsidian horns. Hey, as Fauna says, how's hell? Fauna, you two know each other? I mean, yeah, she just said, would Ezramus be willing to help? So she just asked if Betty thought Ezramus would, yeah. And he's surprised that Marlo, being a human, can see him. Fauna explains that that's why they're here. It was sort of a 2 birds, 1 stone situation, and he says, you didn't have to go through all this trouble with Betty. I would have come for you. The way he rested on the end of his sentence was borderline pornographic. Oh god, don't give the book banners in Florida any new idea of what the term pornography means. They'll say anything's pornographic now. Marlo introduces herself with her whole ass government name, and Fauna's like, you dumb dumb bitch. You keep giving your whole government name to preternatural entities. Stop doing that. Fauna asks Asramus, hey, by the way, how is your royal family? And he's like, how did you know to ask about that? And she explains, well, Marlo is the prince's human. He says it's an honor to meet her. Asramus is just like, good guy, trademark. Like, he's just a nice guy. He's like the patron saint of kicking bad men's ass and really good in bed, according to Fauna, and really hot and a nice friend to Marlo. He's just good. We haven't seen the prince. He hasn't come back from the mortal realms in some times, and if he isn't with his human, then I'm not sure where he is. Word is he hasn't been in hell for a while, and I'm not high ranking enough to have access to the information. You should speak to the king. He would want to help you, not just for his son, but for you, Marlo. I still don't understand like what exactly Marlo's point in all of this is. Apparently there's going to, and we're going to get told this eventually, there's a war between heaven and hell. All right, that makes sense. I mean, I grew up on spiritual warfare. I get that. I just don't really understand what Marlo's place in all of this is, and I thought that in a over 500 page book that I would get told that like very explicitly, but instead I just got very explicitly told multiple times how much of a shit friend Marlo is to literally anybody and everybody. So the only way that Marlo is going to be able to go into another realm like hell is if she is either bound to an entity, so either Silas or Fauna or Caliban, or if she has something else. So as Ramus asks, well, was her ancestor given anything? And Fauna asks her, okay, do you have access to your grandma, your great grandma's things? She said, yeah, and there's a chest at my parents' house that has my great grandmother's bunad, and there's a soulier pinned to it. The filigree jewelry was often passed down in traditional Scandinavian families as an heirloom. Fauna's fingers tightened around my arms. This is important, Marlo. If you've seen the brooch or a picture of it, think carefully. What does it look like? Is it like a crown, a flower, a pretty shape? No, my great grandma's was different. It always looked like a tree. So they're like, okay, well, Asramus has to go. And Marlo's like, okay, but like, what does my great grandma's brooch have to do with literally fucking anything? And Betty says, it sounds like your heirloom is the gift of 1,000 lifetimes. It'll allow you to walk with Fauna between realms without needing to be bound to anyone. And Marlo says, but why would I go alone? I don't know how. Betty says, I said the object will allow you to walk through realms without being bound. I didn't say anything about not needing to be accompanied, though you could do worse than bonding yourself to Fauna. I mean, out of everybody in this book, I would bind myself to Fauna. And Fauna's like, okay, so how long is the drive to your parents' house? And Marlo says, this was worse than summoning a demon. She hasn't talked to her parents in years. She says, my mom's gonna see right through you. It says, growing up, my parents along with church elders had referred to the gift as the discernment of spirits. It was one of the fruits of the soul, according to biblical lore, while every believer was said to have a spiritual gift that furthered the kingdom of God. Oh no, my religious drama, it's coming. Most of them were granted things like charity, generosity, the power to uplift, wisdom, understanding, or piety. The three rarest and most hotly contested gifts were scattered everywhere from the old book of Isaiah to the New Testament references in Corinthians. These abilities were said to be prophecy, the interpretation of tongues, and the discernment of spirits, though they were talents that God doled out with a careful hand. In my sect of Fundyland, Christian Evangelical Fundyland, that is not what I was taught. I was taught explicitly by my mom in particular that everybody has the gift of discernment of spirits. Everybody has the gift of certainly at least speaking in tongues, and I assume that probably extends to interpretation of tongues. So speaking in tongues, if you don't know what that means in Evangelical Fundyland, let me show you.
Angels are being released right now. Angels are being dispatched right now. Hamanda aka ata raka teda baka sanda ata ambo osa kata rite eke banda ata rike didi ashata.
So yeah, that would happen regularly at my church. Every Sunday, one person shouts it out. They say that the spirit comes upon them and they speak in tongues, which is like the language of angels. And then you wait in silence until somebody in the crowd has the spirit come upon them and interprets it. As to whether or not this is real, I have no idea. As to whether or not these people are making an active choice to do it, I don't know. All I can tell you is that it never happened to me. One of my friends said, I don't think I have the gift of speaking in tongues. And when I told my mom that, she said, that's not true. Everybody has the gift. You just choose whether or not you allow the Holy Spirit to come upon you and utilize that gift. So it's very interesting because, like, again, the Bible can be interpreted in a gazillion different ways, and each and every fundy thinks that they have the interpretation that is correct. We then switch back to when Marlo was 4 years old. She had gone outside. The other kids were mean to her because there's not a single nice child in this book other than Kirby, who then Marlo treats like shit in adulthood. And outside of their trailer, she runs into an Arctic fox after the other kids have been mean to her. Then the fox comes to her in her room, and this is Caliban. Caliban. She just doesn't know it at the time. She says, how did you get in here? Are you somebody's pet? She's very articulate for a 4-year-old. And while she's talking to this fox, her mom walks in, and her mom realizes that her daughter is talking to an evil spirit, or that's the assumption that her mom is making. She dragged her to the church. The pastor's been called. They bring in the water, I assume holy water. The men who pressed their hands on my head, my back, my shoulders while I cried. My church didn't have elders, so I don't know what denomination this is based off of, but my church didn't have elders. We definitely had pastor, and we definitely did the laying of hands thing whenever somebody thought that there was a demonic spirit or an illness that was caused by a demonic spirit.
Laying on of hands brings continuity to the body of Christ. It brings continuity between one generation and the next. There are some spiritual perspectives about specific functions, and I'll just tag them. We'll look at them briefly, but it's about, we lay hands on one another to transmit blessings or spiritual authority or wisdom or the Holy Spirit or a spiritual gift or a ministry. Or secondly, to commission, a biblical way of commissioning a person for service in the body of Christ. You see, the skeptics will say it's just a perfunctory public presentation. Oh, so with your opinion, you set aside the practice of Scripture. I've been in those institutions. They make fun. What a quaint idea. What an out-of-date idea. The laying on of hands is a way of endorsing or giving authority to another person. I have asked the Lord, it seems in spiritual matters, we forfeit a great deal from generation to generation. You know, in the scientific community, much less so.
My mom changed after that day. Her discernment of spirits had allowed her to see that her child had been visited by the devil, I'd learned. But through the daily hours of prayer, dedication, piety, study, church visits, and purification, God would still lay claim on me. Chapter 17 starts, and we're with Marlo at age 16, and it's been like an ongoing thing where her mom has told her no foxes, and she says no foxes. But Marlo knows in her heart that the fox is good. She explains that she grew up in poverty, and while her mom, they never had stuff. Our house was cheap, but it was quaint. My mother cleaned obsessively. Cleanliness is next to godliness, she'd say. That's actually not in the Bible, I'd reply. I'd always gained a smile of approval for her. She liked that I was well read and could argue my verses. While other teenagers were getting boyfriends and going to parties, I was excelling as a student of the church, glowing each time I earned her approval. Her praise was like the sun after winter, cutting through the freeze-outs. Oh shit, this is actually affecting me again, reading it even the second time. Her praise was like the sun after winter, cutting through the freeze-outs, the silent treatments, the punishments that frosted my misdeeds. But my mother went on washing, as if she swept and sterilized and spruced to prove her worthiness should anyone step into our home and witness our poverty. By the time I was old enough to remember living in a trailer with no air, no water and electricity, my mom was different. But this is how my mom was, that her praise was like the sun after winter, cutting through the freeze-outs and the silent treatments. That hit me pretty hard, because that is exactly how I was growing up with my mom in a fundy household. Whew! Okay, I'm gonna move on because I'm too traumatized to harp on that any longer. Wait, no, we're gonna do some more. I forgot. Oh no, not the feelings. Oh man, I have mommy issues. She said Jesus was the only friend I needed. Jesus and her, of course. Oh no, I'm not gonna cry. Damn, not this book actually making me cry. That's crazy. She called what we had friendship. We were best friends, she said, and I believed her, though sometimes I wasn't sure how much of our companionship was by choice. It was a solemn vow, she'd say, before singing haunting, beautiful songs with terrifying theology to lull me to sleep, each melody reinforcing fear over my soul and its eternal destination. It was a promise she'd made before coaxing my secrets from me. Oh man. Oh my god, I feel this in my chest. That's crazy. It was something she'd repeat before something I said or did ignited her rage. That was the pattern for years and years, and it worked. At least it worked for her. Everything was fine until it wasn't. If you have religious trauma mommy issues and you felt that in your chest, you are not alone. Woof. Yeah, that's actually good writing. That's good work. I felt that in my chest. All right. No matter how I tried, I was always one imperfection, one sin, one shortcoming away from crossing through the pearly gates. I broke God's heart time and time again, so my mother said, and he wasn't the only one. Anguishing waves of disappointment from the way my mother looked at me, the sneers at school, and the disgust in the faces of the church elders. Men who'd once rebuked a frightened little girl for seeing unclean spirits in the form of a white fox made me feel like I was suffocating day in and day out. I wasn't wasn't happy, nor would I ever be. And what's bonkers about growing up in Funnyland is that they tell you that it's your fault, and they also tell you that if you don't do it their way, that you'll never experience joy. And even though my dad is like fundy in his own way, different than my mom, he's not a church attender. The last time I like ever spoke to my dad, like one of the things he said to me was that I would never experience joy, true joy, because I was not having a personal relationship with Christ. And that's what they tell you. So they make you afraid not to act a certain way. And then when you think to yourself like, well, this is making me really fucking depressed, you're like, well, I'm still fucking up then because I'm never going to experience joy without Christ. Shit. Like, it's a no way out situation. So because she was experiencing all of this, she reached for a bottle of painkillers in her medicine cabinet, and it says 2 male words came from the shadows, drop it. She runs to her mom because her dad wasn't home, and she says, there's someone in the house, and her mom says, then pray for protection. This is it's like my mom is in this book. This is so traumatizing. She sees him again and she asks, are you real? And he says, I am, though this wasn't how or when I wanted to meet. She says, do you only visit at night? And he says, I'm not sure if it's wise for me to visit when the sun's out. So this is Caliban. Why? She asked. I know you can see me now in the shadows, but it might alarm you in the light of day. Is that why you appeared to me as a fox? And she asked, does everybody have a guardian angel? And he says, I can't speak for what everyone has, but I'm only yours. I thought that was kind of sweet. So we're at 42%, and this is where I felt like the book should have started. I feel like we could switch around some of the stuff we did, especially with Fauna entering, but we should have started the book here. There is no reason not to. The religious trauma stuff, that would have hooked me from the beginning. Like, imagine my reaction to this book if we had cut out Marlo being a shit human to her friends who have absolutely no importance or relevance or even need to be in this story, and we had started with that moment of those instances with her mom, her seeing this fox, her seeing this man, and her mom time and time again traumatizing her with these religious beliefs. I mean, I would have been hooked from the start, rather than starting with her being on a date and saying, I'm staring down the barrel of the lesser of two evils, which again, that sentence is terrible. It doesn't make sense. If we had started here, maybe I would have given this book a higher rating than I did. And to be honest, I didn't give it 1 star, but if we had started here, I wouldn't have given the rating that I did give. However, the ending still sucks. And she tells him, you know, what do I call you? And he's like, you call me what you want. And she calls him Caliban. She asked her parents about guardian angels, which that's not really a thing in the sect of Funnyland that I grew up in. You don't get like a particular guardian angel. And we don't believe that when people die, who's we, Rachel? They, I'm not part of that anymore. Holy fuck. When they say that when people die, they don't become angels, which I know is like a belief of some people who still have like, you know, I'm agnostic. I don't know what the fuck to believe now, but some people believe that when people die, they become angels or guardian angels. In my sect of Funnyland, we don't believe that. In fact, that's like very sacrilegious to believe. There are angels, and then when you die as a person, you go to heaven to be with God, and your entire existence is like your, you know, God is the sun, and you're just circling around him. You don't even care about your former family anymore. All you care about is that you get to worship God forever, which sounds really fucking boring, but you're not allowed to say that in Funnyland. So she explains, I see my angels sometimes to her parents, and her parents say, well, you might have your mother's gift. The discernment of spirits can be a very powerful gift, Marlo. It also means you have a great responsibility. And she gives her a book, but it doesn't say which book. And it says it's fiction, but it's about someone who can see angels and demons. They fight over our towns, our houses, and our hearts as if each place is a territory. I'm not sure which book this would be referring to. It could be this, but I'm not sure. So she asked her mom, so you see demons like monsters? And her mom says, did you know that Lucifer was once the most beautiful angel? He was a musician. He played beautiful music. He was one of God's favorite angels. A lot of people in the church translate his name to Morning Star or Shining One. He was the dawn, a new day. And she says to her mom, you talk about him like you know him. I'm surprised I didn't earn her a slap. He rebelled against God, and Marlo says to bring evil into the world. Her mom says no, because he thought he was equal to God. He took a lot of angels with him who no longer wanted to be under God. And she says, this just sounds like people not wanting to have slaves and masters, but be equals. And her mom says, don't say that. Yeah, you don't say that. So Marlo asks, okay, so if those angels rebelled, then why didn't God just evaporate them? And her mom says, go read the book I gave you, and I hope for your sake that you didn't inherit my gift. And she says, well, I see angels. And her mom says, what angels do you see? And she says, well, I see my guardian angel and I pray for him. And her mom says, no. And this is where I started to get anxious for her. And Marlo's like, I just pray to God to keep my angel safe. And she says, no, nothing of God would ask you to pray to it. She's like, you're not listening. I don't pray to it. I pray for before him. She says, it's not a him. And she says, I knew after that day that I should never mention my fox or my angel again. She doesn't want to go see her mom with Fauna. It's the next chapter. It's chapter 18. She's like begging Fauna, like, please don't make me go see my mom. It's a 9-hour drive. And Fauna's like, it'll be fun. And let's listen to your book on the way there. A Night of Runes by Merritt Finnegan, book 1 of the Pantheon series. Despite my reminding her as often as possible that it was fiction and that I had been in college when I'd written it, that I'd learned and grown since then, she had no greater joy in the world than to talk over the book every time I'd made an inaccuracy regarding the so-called pagan gods, the cryptids, or the fae that had launched me into an unprecedented success. She informed me on more than one occasion that whatever such deity, entity, or being would laugh themselves into stitches when they heard what I'd said about them. And she explains that Frigg, Odin's wife, has already read her book. That's not funny, Fauna. You'd better be telling a really bad joke right now. She's our great protective mother of all. She was very curious to see what damage someone with a drop of our blood could do. And she explains that the Pantheon's actually very happy with her, the Norse gods. I'm not lying. We've had more converts to Norse paganism after the release of your book than we had in nearly 2 centuries. You drove a whole generation to seek answers. Tourism throughout Scandinavia skyrocketed. Now I'd have to talk to our buddies along the Mediterranean to see if they saw similar results after book 2, but even if you're a moron, you're one who's making a lot of friends in high places. Again, I like this idea and I wish that we had introduced the big bad sooner because we're still not going to see her for another 25%, I think. Am I doing math right? Yeah. We're not going to see her for another 25%. We could have introduced her way sooner, had Marlo make a bad deal with her. Like, it just could have been so fun because I love the idea of like a god being like, I want you to bring me back into relevancy with your books. I love that idea. It's genuinely unique, kind of genius. And then we just like didn't really do anything with that idea. And Marlo's like really obsessed with the idea that she is loved by the gods that she wrote about. I'd done something good. I'd sparked human interest. I'd made not just one, but many happy with me. And she tells Fauna, the first 18 years of my life revolved around whether or not I was disappointing God, as in the Christian God. Every action, every move, every thought hinged on me saying or doing or thinking the right thing. Every decision I made was rooted in terror that a deity might be angry with me, or that I was letting him down, or that he'd be mad. As if I didn't already have enough mental illnesses before we factored in the shame and judgment. Just give me a moment to process the concept that not one but multiple gods don't hate me. And Fauna says he, as in the Christian God, is a jealous dick. And here we get to the part where it explains why this series is called No Other Gods. You know that verse in the book you were raised with? It's from your 10 commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. No one considers what's spelled out there in the verse. If no other gods can come before him, he confirms the existence of other gods. And yet here we are. Look at the fae through your religious lens and call them whatever you want. Make them your angels and demons, but at the end of the day, pierce the veil. Pierce the veil. I love that band. Pierce the veil and you're left with us. The Nords, more or less, keep to ourselves. Then you've got the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Chinese gods, who, by the way, were really disappointed that you chose South America over them. Seems like you're neglecting the global east there, Miss Mythology. Next Pantheon book, eh? Okay, so if no other gods can come before him, he confirms the existence of other gods. Okay, so this is a really common thing. I have no feelings. I don't believe in this religion anymore, but I just want to say that as a former fundie, this is a really common thing I see now on TikTok where people are like, if no other gods can come before him, then the Christian God is admitting that there are other gods. And the thing is that unfortunately, at least in the sect of Funnyland that I grew up in, they were way ahead of you in teaching the mental gymnastics to us about what that verse says. They taught us, no, it's not that there are other gods, it's that humans, by virtue of being born into sin, make idols out of things that are not God, because in our human nature is to rebel from God and to make gods out of things. Not that there are other existing deities, but rather we are so prone to idolatry because we want to reject God, because that is our human sin nature. Everybody, from the time that they are conceived, everybody is born into sin nature. So like back in the day when I was vegan, right? Somebody told me that they thought, because I was still a Christian at the time, they thought that I was making veganism my God because I was spending so much time thinking about it, and to them I was spending more time on veganism than I was spending with God. And this is a thing that they do to you in Funnyland. People feel the need to police your behavior all the time, so if they see you doing something that they can say, I'm lovingly telling you that I think you're doing this thing that's against God, they'll tell you you're making an idol out of something, or another term for making an idol out of something is making it your God. So it's not that God is admitting that you have, this is what I was taught, I'm not saying this is what I believe, but they're ahead of you in mental gymnasticsing the children, okay? It's not that they believe that there are other gods, it's that they believe that you are making a God out of something because you are deifying things in your life rather than spending that time worshiping the Christian God. So I know it sounds like a slam dunk, but unfortunately, if you want to reach the kids like me who grew up in that sect of Fundyland, you're going to have to make an argument that works in, you know, the mental gymnastics of what we taught to combat that mental gymnastics. So the point I'm making is that they train us to combat that idea. So if you're trying to, I want to call it having a gotcha moment, but if you're trying to sort of like use that to sort of deprogram Christianity in certain people and try to like get them to see like, hey, the Bible is not actually infallible, that's not the way to go, because a lot of us were taught to respond to you already by saying, no, it's not that the Christian God is admitting by saying no other gods before me that there are other gods. He's saying stop making gods out of things that you idolize. Instead of worshiping me, you're worshiping the God of your own making. So you have made a God through like the process of worshiping, not a real God, but you have made a God in your life out of whatever thing that you are spending too much time on. So it could be something like porn, a god of pornography, like you've made a god out of pornography, or you are a slave to the god of food, like they become food obsessed. Like, you know, at least in my circle of Funnyland, like health is seen as my circle. What the fuck? The circle that I was in of Fundyland, like being healthy, like even the food that you eat is to glorify God. And if you eat too much junk food, then you are making a god out of junk food. But then on the flip side of that, if you become obsessed with your intake of food and you have an eating disorder, then you have made your eating disorder your god. There really is no winning. But the point is, you can make a god out of anything. It's not saying that there are other deities in existence. It's saying that they believe that humans have a tendency to worship things or ideas rather than the actual living, which is what they call him, God. And then it goes back to the thing that we're doing where it says, she resumed the book, pointing out inaccuracies and laughing at the way I'd painted certain characters and locations until it was my turn to ask something. So she asked, it's about Caliban. I just don't understand. He's been with me since I was a child. He was a fox for years. Then I thought he was an imaginary friend, then a guardian angel, but I was a kid. Then I had to let it all go when I left my faith. He was just a coping mechanism, a hallucination. Fauna says that she's not going to answer until she gets gummy bears because she's obsessed with sugar. Then after several pages, or at least on my ebook, it says, I'm going to take a stab at it and say he met you a few lifetimes ago. You were probably, I don't know, 18, 25, 40. The age doesn't matter. The human cycle has been around for a long time. So this is saying that everybody reincarnates, and throughout your reincarnations, you may worship one pantheon or another. You could have been anywhere. You could have been anyone. You would have been more open-minded than you are in this lifetime. Obviously, if the two of you fell in this sort of love, whatever connection you shared was important enough to seek out time and time again, even if it meant he'd have to find you in each of your lives. So of course he'd want to seek you out when you're a kid just to make sure you're okay. I thought that what we were going to do was then we were going to start see her like unlocking her former memories of her and Caliban, because we're at 45% at this point in the book and I don't know really the dynamic between her and Caliban. What do they talk about? What do they have in common? I don't know. And unfortunately, having finished the book, we did not get a flashback until the very end, and it was such a non-substantial thing, which was really disappointing because I was really hoping to see more of that substantial, like if he's been coming back to find her throughout her human cycles over and over and over again. Cool, I like that idea, but I wanted to see it and you didn't see it. So again, I end this book not really having a good understanding of why I was supposed to care about Marlo and Caliban, or why Marlo and Caliban care about Marlo and Caliban. So then she starts asking about Silas, asking about the claim that Silas and the Christian God had on her. He and his master are referring to your baptism. Splash of water here, pretty white dress there. It's a bargaining chip to keep them in play at best. Heaven wants you, probably only because you're important to hell, but you belong to no one until you decide. She explains that Caliban and Silas are on opposite sides of a war. He and Caliban are on opposite sides of what was once a united kingdom, centuries, millennia locked in a cold war like a bunch of losers wasting their time. A battle in which, for the record, only humans are on Silas's side, and even then it's a limited number of humans. Every other realm is with hell in this one. The defectors had every right to leave. They shouldn't have had to live in servitude. So then I thought, oh cool, we're gonna see the Christian God at some point. He's gonna be the big bad, and we're going to explain like why there's this war and we're gonna do that war, and Marlo is maybe like a bargaining chip, and then that didn't happen. Have you guessed who the villain is? You're wrong no matter who you guess. Unless you've read the book, there's no way you can possibly know, because she didn't come up until randomly at 70% in. And Marlo's trying to make sense of this, but she's of course not asking like the most basic questions, but she does ask, why does it matter with Silas in play? I don't fully get why it's so important now that the Nords are involved. I want Caliban back more than words can say. I've been so in love with him for as long as I can remember. It's consumed my thoughts and ruined my life for 10 goddamn years, but it doesn't have to be ruined. He's real, we're real, I'm not crazy. I can let myself fully love him back, and I'm stressed as fuck knowing that Ezramis doesn't know where he is. His disappearance is my fault and I know it. But things have been like this for thousands of years, right? I don't mean to be dismissive, but how much would change if, and Fauna cuts her off and says, everything. Do you think the humans will be spared once the stalemate is over? God's ruled with iron fists on your soil. If the tide turns, if the war is over, everything changes. You don't get to be a normal human. Life, as every person on this planet knows it, is done. And when that war is over, who do you want reigning on Earth? She was talking about the apocalypse. And I'm like, okay, I'm missing something. I still don't know what it is. I finished the book and I still don't know what it is. Somehow, the Prince of Hell is very important to the war. It doesn't go into specifics. Just being the Prince of Hell, you gotta give me something a little more here. Somehow, Marlo is important to the war. How? I don't know. And again, the war takes a back seat. The war between heaven and hell takes a back seat. It's not the point of this book. I pictured the last book of the Bible, the prophecy of God bringing heaven to earth. It was a foregone conclusion that he would win. It had sounded like a wonderful thing, and I could be the catalyst to the book of Revelation. I don't know how we got there. I don't really understand how we got there. It just seems like we jumped to, how are you the catalyst for Revelations? I don't understand. Like, even biblically, I'm not sure how we wove this in here. And like, I'm fairly well versed on Revelations enough. I mean, I grew up in Funnyland. I mean, we could have tied Marlo to part of what Revelation says, but we just didn't. I'm not really sure why. Fauna does tell her that if she doesn't want to join heaven or hell, she could bond with Fauna and just be with her people and completely stay out of the war. But apparently Odin doesn't want Fauna to bond with Marlo. I'm not really understanding why. In chapter 19, Kirby and Nia, remember them, are starting to text Marlo asking like, hey, are you good? Are you still with Fauna? What's going on? And E.G., Marlo's agent, is like, hey, your chapters are due tomorrow. If you don't have them, you need to tell me. Then she texts again, Marlo, deadline's passed. You didn't text me. Do you need extensions? Marlo ignores this and goes on Facebook to look up her parents' shared account. It was their way of preempting infidelity or whatever it is they told each other. Yeah, that's pretty common in Funnyland. And she sees that they bought a house after years of living in poverty. They have finally found a house and are able to pay for it because her dad got a better job. So then they get the brooch at her mom's. They go to her mom's house. They break in. They get the brooch. These are exceptionally rare, Fauna says. Every pantheon has their legends about gifts like this. Your great-grandfather gave it to Aloisa, your great-grandmother, so that she could move to and from the mortal realm to visit him on her terms. And then her mom gets home, except she's not alone. Silas is with her. And she's like, Marlo Esther Thorson, because of course her middle name is Esther, because every Fundy girl gets named a biblical name. Why do you think my name is Rachel? My niece was almost named Ruth after Ruth of the Bible. And it explains that her mom and her always had like a relationship that was not great in adulthood. Obviously the stuff happened in her childhood, but in adulthood, when she came back from South America and she was done escorting, her mom had seen her cash that she had hidden and then helped herself to her computer, looked through her messages, found pictures that she had sent to clients, and this is how she got kicked out of her mom's house forever. And her mom's like, I've spent every day praying for your soul. I love you, Marlo. And Silas is like, I told you, we have a claim to her. Fauna calls him a cocksucker. You can shove that claim up your master's ass the next time you're kissing it. We're done here. This like waffles. Like sometimes Fauna is like, I can't stand Silas, and then other times she's like, Silas is a nice guy. And it doesn't really explain like the waffling. Fauna tries to just have her and Marlo walk out the door and leave. Unfortunately, her mom has made it so that, you know, things are trapped within the house. So Fauna could go. She could just teleport out, but she couldn't take Marlo with her. And Silas is like, I'm still willing to bond with you, Marlo. You could see beyond the veil. I'm sorry I had to be like this, but there was no other way to get to you. I don't know how we got from him being like, oh, I'm not even gonna save your life, you're in this basement, to I want to bond with you so bad, Marlo. It still has not gotten explained to me, and I've finished the book. I won't let anything happen to you. I've already proven my worth to you. I've saved you 3 times already. You left her in a basement. You gotta explain. So she tells Fauna, step into another realm, don't leave me, I'll use the Soulier. And they did this kind of like sneaky, which I'm not really understanding why they had to do it sneaky. I don't know how Silas would have prevented them from doing what they were doing. So using her brooch from her great grandmother and Fauna Fauna's help, she teleports to hell. Where are we? Welcome to hell, it says. So they go to a bar where Don't Fear the Reaper is playing. She orders a beer, which Fauna calls gross bread soda, which I agree. And Fauna tells her, go ahead and ask all the questions you want to ask. You're in hell and all you ever do is ask stupid questions. And at this point, I'm pretty sure it's your only personality trait. Actually, no, it's not her only personality trait. Her main personality trait is being a huge asshole to everybody in her life who cares about her. So then she is like, I'm scared of hell because what I was taught. And Fauna's like, okay, well, hell is not what you thought it was. And she says, are you going to make the Valley of Gehenna argument? Every deconstructionist knows what we're talking about. No, but I appreciate that you're halfway there. Sheol was the original Hebrew translation, the realm of the dead. If your big bad devil was forced to do things for God, wouldn't that mean he was still in servitude? Like a prisoner of sorts doing heaven's bidding, serving faithfully by punishing bad guys or whatever. And if he's a faithful servant, then did he commit treason? Because either you buy into the idea that he's a fallen angel because he rebelled and rules his own kingdom, or we believe he continues to serve his original king by faithfully punishing people and continues to be a good little lapdog for the kingdom of heaven. Have it one way or the other. I gotta admit, this is not something that they teach us in Funnyland. They don't teach us critical thinking, so I never got to that point. But that is not an argument that I was ever taught to combat. So I have nothing to regurgitate you from all of my years and years in Christian schooling. I don't know why the devil would agree to do God's bidding. Maybe he gets something out of putting people in the lake of fire. I'm trying to think of like what Fundyland would have taught me about this. Then all of a sudden, right after just calling Silas a cocksucker, now that we're in hell, she says, Silas isn't a total prick. We went on a date once. He took me to a nice place in heaven. He paid and was a perfect gentleman. So then Fauna decides to finally ask, you didn't even believe in Caliban. Now you're on a vigilante mission to find him. Why? And Marlo says, you mean other than because he's hotter than you? And I'm like, okay, First of all, never mind. Second of all, why didn't we have this conversation way sooner? Like when Marlo originally brought up wanting to find Caliban. She answers, because he's the only person who's ever truly seen me, and fuck, I've been so madly in love with him. Even when I didn't think he was real, I fought it so goddamn hard to learn I could have given in long ago that I didn't have to make my life this difficult. It's torture. But then why didn't Caliban just say that that was an option and like lay out the plans of what they could have done? But again, Caliban's terrible at plans. He understands me so well that it was easy for me to convince myself that he was just a projection of my subconscious. He gets my sense of humor. He's so fucking clever. But I thought that he was the part of me that loved myself, you know? Like, my self-loathing was so palpable that I had to create an external figure that didn't judge me, that helped me think through things without making me feel bad about myself. He was the part of me, well, what I believed was the part of me, that thought I was worth keeping alive, and he did. I really wish I understood, like, why Caliban didn't make a plan. People have seen my value for what I can do for them. My parents saw me as an extension of them, a chance to do better where they'd failed. When I was an escort, my value was as an accessory. I was professional arm candy, one who could keep a conversation going, who could read moods, who could offer an experience so that someone might get to feel the height of dating and lust for a night. Now that I'm successful, so many people see me as sort of a feather in their cap, but with Caliban, I'm just me. Okay, but like Kirby and what's her name? Nia also feel that way about you. And he never pushed me to change, you know? My journeys were mine to go through and also mine to reflect on with his support, and sometimes that support was just being held all night while I was convinced I was crazy. So Fauna says we need to go to the palace and ask for an audience with the king. Marlo notices that Fauna seems kind of nervous and asks her, what are you so afraid of? And Fauna's like, well, I need to make a phone call to Ramus. And this was so overly dramatic for no fucking reason. So as Ramus shows up and he drives a Bugatti in hell, they immediately start flirting to the point where I'm uncomfortable, as would have soaked anyone's panties. But hearing him unleash himself was, oh yeah. But they get back to his apartment and he's like, oh, there's clothes in the closet that'll fit you. Bye, Marlo. And they go, him and Fauna go fuck. Hearing him unleash himself was a memory I'd have to tuck into the back of my memory. Hearing him unleash himself was a memory I'd have to tuck into the back of my memory. Why are we using the word twice? For lonely nights, the hedonistic music of their ravishing carried from their room into mine. My right hand moved in company with their sounds, my left working my breast until it landed on my throat. You ever listen to your friends fucking masturbate? Me neither. Quero me drogar. My back arched off the bed in coordination with the snarls and the loud climactic screams of their grand finale happening on the other side of the wall. I helped myself once, then twice. If they didn't want my adjacent participation, they shouldn't have made their sexual chemistry such a palpable problem. I came harder than I had in months and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I did not want to know that. I don't like it. Please don't tell me that you masturbate to the sound of your friends fucking. If my friends did that to me, I would be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So then in the morning she looks around and she realizes, okay, these clothes are Fauna's. That perfume is Fauna's. This is Fauna's stuff in Esramus's house. So she asks, like, who is Esramus to you? And Fauna's like, well, what do you want to know? She's like, why don't you just be with him if you guys are together? If someone adores you for your chaos, what's the best way to honor that love? If they treasure your rootlessness, if they celebrate your anarchy, if they love you as you are, do you think they'd be dancing in the streets if you gave up the very essence of the core of your being that made them fall for you? Esramus is like, how do you want your coffee? And Fauna says, she likes her coffee like she likes her men. Hot. Okay, so a woman who is a Lilith, not the Lilith, which I never learned about from the Bible. I didn't know who Lilith was until I was an adult. That's not something they ever taught me. A Lilith has to show up and dress her so that she can go see the king of hell, the devil. Before Lilith shows up, wait, it says that Esramus says he hates cookies, and she's like, well, why do you have a bunch of cookies in your house? Why do you buy them? But first it says, my mouth opened, the uneaten cookie falling onto the plate where I'd left the dredges of my coffee. It had been abhorrently sweet. Dredge is like when you use this to, you know, dredge a river. Dregs is what's left at the bottom of a cup. I'm getting deja vu. So the Lilith shows up. Her name is Iana. She's like making calls about dressing Marlo, and then she asks Marlo, how does a human girl lose the prince of hell? And then it just cuts off and she never answers the question. I don't even know why Iana asked. As it turned out, the devil did not in fact wear Prada. Oh my god, the devil wears Prada. It's another shout out to another band that I like. What's funny is that the Devil Wears Prada is actually a post-hardcore but Christian band, and in 2009, if I had had enough money, I would have gotten the Devil Wears Prada lyrics tattooed on me that said, all mistakes can be marked by borders, all of love can be traced to a maker. Can you tell that I was still a Christian in 2009? Anyways, so she's getting luxury, painted, dressed shit to go see the devil. And as Raimi's, before they go see the devil, is like, I need you to know that you cannot make any promises, don't even say thank you, semantics matter, don't give away your name. They go to the devil's office. First they meet a soul eater. She introduces herself as Maribel. I'm the princess human, she says. I still don't know what the fuck that means. You don't have to do this. We can leave now, Fauna says. And I'm still willing to bond with you. And it says, hey Fauna, don't make this weird, but I'm pretty sure I love you. And Fauna says, I love you too, loser. And I'm like, when the fuck did y'all become friends? I mean, Fauna's cool and all, but like, I just feel like I wasn't there for that. Did I miss it? Did it fly by me at like lightning speed? So you're thinking, oh, okay, the devil's gonna be a dick. The devil's not a dick. The devil is like a cool dad. Like he's literally just Caliban's cool dad. He's like, Maribel! He crushes her in a hug in like a gentle devil way. He has enormous feathered wings that reflect the rainbow iridescence of an oil slick. We did meet once nearly 2,000 years ago. I don't suppose you remember, but of course, why would you? Most of those caught in the mortal loop don't. You weren't ready to join us at that time, and my son is not one to rush perfection. He's my better in many ways, but by the powers, you're as splendid now as you were then. And I'm like, I just wanted, like, if I found out that I were basically the soulmate of the Prince of Hell and I kept living reincarnated over and over, I would have a lot of questions beyond, how do I find Caliban? I would be like, what were my past lives? Can anybody tell me what my past lives were? How do I unlock that shit? And why did I not ever choose to like bind myself to Caliban in all my previous, what is the word? Iterations? Incarnations? Fuck. Apparently she's named Caliban all kinds of stuff in her different lives. Kit, Vulpes, and Nyx. Oh, and the cycle where you named him Fluffy. I'm almost certain it was before your people at the time crossed the Bering Strait, although I get the dates mixed up. Of course, the word for Fluffy you used, what was it? Oh, no bother. Was that the one where he remained a beast and never took a human form? Do you remember when you were in Haiti? Oh, of course you don't. Maribel, sweet Maribel, the joy of our kingdom, please tell me you've come to join us at long last. And I'm like, the joy of our kingdom? What the fuck is she to hell? Like, what is she to hell? So Fauna explains that Maribel is at risk because of her Fae lineage. Some fuck shit happened with Silas. The devil is very unpleased to hear about an angel being involved. An angel is tracking her and my son is not here with her. I'm like, you don't know where your own kid is? God, play that commercial from when we were kids. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Even if you're the devil. And he tells her, this could be your last cycle, Maribel, and not for the better. And I'm like, wait, why? Somebody explain something to me. I'd fallen in love over and over, again with the same soul, connected to him through time, through body, through country, through language. Since the sands of time had flipped from BCE to AD, I wasn't sure if I was honored or horrified. And I'm like, I mean, I wouldn't be either. I would be very curious. I would have about 1 million questions, and who better to answer them than the literal fucking devil / dad of the guy we're talking about. Also, I'd have some questions about, you know, I'm an ex-Christian. I have a lot of questions for the literal devil. But this is the fastest chapter of all time, and it ends so abruptly. Fauna tells Marlo, okay, you need to tell the king what happened with Caliban, like why he's gone. That's the blessing and curse of mortality, isn't it? Your life is short, so you're allowed to live it with little rhyme or reason. You can pay penance in your next life or the one after that. When you live forever, you can't say things you don't mean. Words have consequences. So she tells him, I'd spent my life convinced he wasn't real. I needed to believe I was crazy. I didn't want to see him anymore, so I didn't. He continued to visit for years, but he was no longer visible. Then we made a deal that he couldn't do anything, couldn't intervene, couldn't so much as lift a finger without my permission. I told him I couldn't do any of it anymore, and rather than lose us altogether, he allowed me to sequester him into a permitted box, and then someone tried to murder me. The angel Silas showed up at the last second, killed the human. I barely made it. Caliban had been unable to intervene. He couldn't help me beyond marking the would-be murderer. I didn't fully understand those implications, but when I'd learned he was there and that he saw everything, that he stood right there and didn't help, and then he cuts her off and says, he loves you deeply, Maribel. To put that sort of mark that even an angel could take is a harbinger of urgency and desperation that no one would pass up. The risk he put himself in, and you haven't seen him since then, since he put out the mark. And so now is the part where she asks, what does it mean, the mark? And I'm like, you have been with Fauna? You have been with Silas multiple times, and you never thought to ask this before? Why? Marks are for favors, as Ramy's had answered a mark for Iana, which is why she had to help us when he called in the favor. And if an angel responded immediately, I assume he'd value the favor really, really highly. So Marlo's like, if he owes the angels a huge favor, why would Silas still want to bond with me? And the devil says, the war, Maribel, because you may be the pawn they've needed to turn the tide. And I'm like, what? How? They don't explain this. They say that the Prince Caliban is not with heaven, and the king says another pantheon is rumored to be involved. Now, I wish he would have elaborated on this so that we could have sown the seeds of who the villain was, but instead we just end it there. Reports are unclear. Why? I mean, say at least what you heard. Reported by who? What was the context? But it isn't heaven and it isn't Nordic. And so the king says of the child that Silas killed, that demon child, not really a demon, but that parasite child that Silas killed, it said, a parasite like that should have been a tier 1 favor, said the devil. Fauna explains that a first tier favor could be something like trading jobs or doing remedial tasks. It's busy work. A tier 1 favor that's sent out for any realm to grab could be more dangerous. If a mermaid calls in a level 1 favor to help to a fire sprite and asks her to help her brush her hair, the sprite would die even though it's a small task. Open realm favors are unwise. They're reserved for the rarest of circumstances. And from your tone, your majesty, I assume the bounty on this entity and its host was not marked as tier 1. And the devil says, no, it's not. And that's the last we see of the devil. Marlo says, I don't understand what just happened in there. And I'm like, me fucking either. That was written really weirdly. So basically, when Caliban marked the guy, what was his name? Richard? Robert? Fuck. The evil guy who tried to kill Marlo, when he marked that guy, and by extension his parasite, he marked it as like a tier 5, a level 5 favor. 5 means whoever you are, whatever you are, come right the fuck now and I'll do whatever you want. So Caliban would owe an enormous favor in response. It means Silas can ask for anything because Silas was the one who showed up and did the favor. He wants Caliban to rip his own soul out and serve it up on a platter. He wants unlimited access to come and go in Hell's Palace. He wants the king to choose between surrender or the death of his son. It's within Silas's right to ask, and he got the favor from the fucking Prince of Hell. This isn't just bad for him, Marlo, it's bad for all the realms. And I thought that this meant that Silas was going to call in the favor and it would be fucking huge, but in the end, I don't really understand what happened with Silas. Like, he called in a favor, kind of, and it just ended up that Caliban was like in a trap by another god who Silas doesn't work for. I'm really fucking confused. Silas wants you. It's the only thing that he's harped on since meeting you. It's why he showed up at your apartment. As far as we know, he hasn't called in the favor. As far as we know, he hasn't told anyone what cards he holds. And I'm like, wait, but then who would Silas be working for? I'm really confused. Like, is that what we're hinting at? Are we hinting that Silas works for somebody else? Is that it? So this is the part where it's like, it feels like they're being like, well, Silas now has the hots for you, sort of. And I'm like, wait, but where did that come from? So Fauna dresses her up in like a tight-fitting outfit with like her titties out. I understood a nymph's incentive to champion the Free the Titties movement, but I wasn't sure unbound D cups were the most suitable attire for seeking an audience with an angel. And I'm like, what the fuck? fuck? So they like suit up in a bunch of gear. They go back to her apartment, to Marlo's apartment, so that they can call Silas in, but they can't be there for that. So they use the soulier, the brooch, and they go back to the mortal realm to Marlo's apartment. She has a shit ton of messages, including from her agent who says like, hey, you missed your deadlines, and she realizes that she's been gone for 2 weeks. Nia, her friend, the married one, not Kirby, was like, I called your biological mother. I also called the police. It says, it's September. It's been 2 weeks. Suddenly realizing that no excuse to EG or the publisher would be enough. No bangcation or hot girl or retreat into the countryside would make Kirby or Nia forgive me for the nightmare I'd put them through, or for the betrayal of holding me while I cried, mourning my family for years, only to have my mother be the one with the answers. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, frankly, I'm surprised that Nia and Kirby didn't dump her ass years ago for a better friend who like actually gives a shit about what's going on in their lives, not just them giving a shit what's going on in her life and her ignoring them. So she's like, all right, I'm gonna call in Silas. You two get the fuck out of here. I know a thing or two about men, and when it comes to weapons, mine is sharp as a goddamn needle. I'll do what I do best. He's a man, right? I'll do what I've always done. First, I'll make him think he has the upper hand, then I'll get him talking. So she calls Silas because he left like a doll there, and that brings him to her, and it says, I'm sorry, I'm doing everything I can. What's that supposed to mean? Marlo asked. Listen, Marlo, it's more complicated than you realize. Then help me realize. You nearly left me to die in a basement. I had to beg you to get me out of there. Now you're everywhere. You're in my apartment. You're in my family. You're leaving tiny gold statues under my bed. That's the doll. What do you want from me? He says, it's about you and it isn't. It's not fair that you're caught up in this, Marlo, but it isn't. But here we are, and we can't change the dice that have been cast. The thieves' oil scents of frankincense and myrrh were strong enough to overpower the candles. It's not thieves' oil! So she asked him, why haven't you told anybody that she went to hell or the Nords? Why hasn't heaven? He cuts her off with a raised hand. Maybe it was the way he stiffened or the quick intake of air, but I knew with immediacy that the truth of my question couldn't be spoken aloud. I realized my foolishness in a moment. If Raimi's, Fauna, and Silas could be in the same apartment, then so could anyone. It is really stupid that you didn't think of that until now. And he tells her, I called it in, as in the favor. Don't say anything, he said. If you know, then you know. Don't say it out loud. Just nod if you understand. So what I'm getting from this is that he called in the favor and he didn't tell anybody that he had the favor. Then she has a boo-boo and he's like, may I? The warm tingling sensation radiated from my joints through my body, filling me with a decadent, downright sinful pleasure as something far more indulgent than healing coursed through me. I nearly choked on it. When I looked back at him in shock, his mouth was quirked up in a half-hearted smile. I'm glad I could make you feel better. And I'm like, is she about to fuck Silas? What the fuck is going on? I didn't have to glance down to know that my breasts had pebbled. Your breast pebbled? You mean your nipples? My breast had pebbled against his nearly translucent shirt. Of course, angels would wear a mesh t-shirt. So he tells her that he called in the bargain for a minor entity. Made for an easy bargain. There's been a job out west that a handful of the faithful had been petitioning us to take. I haven't wanted to tackle it as it's below my rank, but their prayers have grown annoying. One pagan deity or the other is making the agriculture in this town thrive like it's 8th century BC. I was made aware of it months ago, but I knew it would start shit with the Phoenicians. I thought it would be easier to make hell take the hit. It's a small gig. It is 71% through this book. That is the first time that the word Phoenicians has showed up. That's the big bad. And really, he's announcing to whoever may be listening from heaven that he and Caliban made a low-level bargain to deal with a minor pest. If you think he can't handle a Phoenician nuisance, then perhaps hell's lost its touch. It's just outside the town of Belleville. Wow, Belfield. Typical deal. Idyllic town seems too good to be true because it is. Be my guest if you think he needs backup. Tell hell thanks for squashing our cockroaches so we don't have to get involved. So all of this is not going to get, like, all of this with the bargain, why Silas is doing any of this is not going to get explained in this book. And I was really confused. Because now we are switching over from this part where we're like, why would Silas do this? We're just not going to answer. Silas, for some reason that didn't get explained, sent Caliban as the bargain to deal with an issue in Belfield, which I think we're going to California, where a Phoenician goddess is being the big bad and she's created a god trap. Perhaps it shouldn't have surprised me to hear that thousands of years later, heaven and the Phoenicians continue to hate one another, but it left a much bigger question in its place. When it came to heaven and its enemies and allies, the Phoenicians may as well have been hell. And he says to her, I did you a favor. I don't know how long he'll be there before others find out. Look to the wild prairie rose. Get to him first. Back with Raimi's and Fauna, she says, since when are the Phoenicians on the board? And Raimi says, since 10,000 BCE. Yeah, no shit. As says, Silas said it was only a minor entity. The only thing in the Phoenician realm known for benefiting crops or that would be of any use to agriculture would be Dagon. Dagon's credited with gifting farmers with the plow, but he's Mer, a Philistine fish god. Oh, the Philistines. Wow, it's been a while since I heard about the Philistines. So they look up the town on, like, what's that called? Satellite. And the whole town has a sigil, which means anything inside the sigil, once in, cannot get out if it is supernatural. Now, Mer could go. What? Marlo. Marlo could go, but Caliban is stuck there inside that sigil. The town is a trap. Silas sent Caliban into a trap? Fauna says, if Silas was trapping Caliban, why would he tell you where to go? Why would he give you the town name or the pantheon? He could have left the prince in prison. This gets weirder by the goddamn second. And I'm like, yeah, it does. And in a 560-page book, the fact that we just introduced this 70% in, and then we don't conclude it in the 560-page book is something. She's like, can I just go there and break the seal? Wouldn't that render it useless? Fauna can't go, but as Raimi says, Marlo may be an 8th Nord, but she's also the closest thing hell has to a princess. I can't let her go alone. So as Raimi's and Marlo go to, are they going to California? Is that where it is? We're gonna call it California. Belfield, California, I think. So they go see Dagon after checking into a very shitty hotel. And Dagon's like, I've been stuck here 252 years. They've kept me here. She could have had it all without me. But if your civilizations crumble and your temples falls to ruins, if your people forget your name and you're unwilling to return to your realm, if you demand a kingdom of your own in a world that has forgotten us, what better way to do it than to capture a god? They ask him who. He doesn't answer, of course, because we're prolonging answers for no reason. If humanity would no longer do her will, if they ceased to build her altars and offer her sacrifices and speak her name, then to become a god's god, that was her evolution. To contain a god who would yield the most excellent crops, who would make her kingdom flourish, would bless its very soil. She didn't want my son here. He'd step on her toes, and that would not do, not for one seeking to be on top. And the son of Dagon is Baal. America, of all the places to summon me, it had to be where the people are so divorced from the old ways, so lost to history and culture and creation that they'd never suspect. Why would she desire Baal's presence in her kingdom if their powers are one and the same? She would spend no more time in the shadows. Furthermore, why would he enter to save me when he knows she would not let him leave? They tell him, you're not the only one trapped here. And he says, well, yeah, and the big bad, she is also caught in her own seal. She is the one who conceives but does not bear. She was the most high, and it's the title she'll retain no matter the cost. Her sacred tradition is to prostitute in her temple. The selling of sex is more delicious to her than the gifting of souls. Find her in Venus. And Marlo's like, who? And as Raimi says, Astarte, the goddess of sex, love, and war. And she's like, you didn't even ask him about Caliban. And he's like, well, the prince can't be tracked. And I'm like, okay, why didn't we tell Marlo what the plan was before we go in? And why is that a theme of we don't tell Marlo what the plan is before we go in? We just leave Marlo to her own devices. Then, once again, as per usual, instead of, despite the fact that this character gets talked about loving having agency, she just once again stumbles into the thing that she's been looking for, the thing that she's been doing. Caliban just finds her and takes her back to her room. I had no idea how he knew which room was mine. I had no recollection of going up the stairs or the door opening. I didn't remember anything until my back was pressed against the wall, cool hands raking through my hair and fingers brushing away my tears. And Caliban said, I am yours and you are mine. Whether it's in this life or the next, we will always find each other. I've missed you more than air, he says. How did you find me? Love, I always know where you are. Imagine my surprise when I felt you step into my kingdom without me, and then to feel you so close. She's like, was I this stupid in all of my lives? I would venture to guess yes. He's like, you're brilliant. You're as quick and clever in this life as you've been in all of them. Really? Because she keeps just like stumbling into shit. They're like touching each other, and she's recounting everything that's happened to him. He kept the back of my head when my conversation drifted to my mother and her cruelty, and then bunched in my hair with a smile when I told him of my time in hell. His teeth glistened with true joy at the way I described his father. He's loved you for more than 2,000 years. You're his daughter in waiting in his eyes. And I'm like, why didn't you tell her any of this? Like, you know how traumatized she was. You could have just been like, hey, by the way, if you bind yourself to me, I can take you to hell and you have a stand-in dad. Me and a stand-in dad. Okay. Fauna said that if heaven wins, every pantheon will fall. Heaven and his angels will reign on earth. 8 billion humans enslaved while calling it worship. I'm not worth the goddamn apocalypse. He says, I can promise you, you are. And I'm like, I just don't understand what she has to do with the apocalypse. It still has not been explained. She says, bond with me. And he's like, I end the loop then, right? Isn't that what everybody's been trying to explain? If we bond, I won't be born again as human. I can stay with you. And he's like, we're already bonded. What we have is more than the formality of realms. You don't need to hook your soul to mine. And I'm like, no, you're gonna have to give a good reason why you're not bonding with this woman. Otherwise, it just feels like, we need need to put that off and I don't know how to put it off in a reasonable way. Even if we were to finalize the bond, it can't be now, Marlo. You know where we are, what this town is? Okay, well, that's fine. Like, if we can't finalize it where we are, fine. But I'm still concerned about why you don't want to, period. If she's that important in preventing the apocalypse and heaven winning, what are we doing? He's like, you can't bind here because you'll be stuck here. It's a god catcher. He's like, I know where Astarte is. There's a bunch of gods caught in the spider web, and I thought that we were going to see a bunch of them, and then we didn't. It's just Dagon and Astarte, and that's it. I was like, oh, we're gonna amass the numbers like Robin Hood and the Merry Men, and we're gonna take her down, and then we didn't do that. They talk about why Silas would do this, and he's like, I don't know, maybe he might be defecting, not really sure. Again, I'm very confused about what the fuck Silas is doing, and she's like, why did you call in a 5-tier favor? Why would you do that? You didn't know who would respond. You didn't know what they would call in. You could have died. I could have lost you. It wasn't just your kingdom or your people. I'm mad at you. Don't be sexy. I'm angry. He's like, can I help it if your rage is a turn on? And then they're like both getting like super turned on. He's like, I need you to set me free from the limitations you put on me in your life. And she's like, done, gone, anything and everything. It's all yours. I'm all yours. The whole problem up to this point that they've had, done. Again, I don't know why he couldn't have just been like, would you like to not live this shitty human life you're in right now? Would you like to maybe be the princess of hell? And they just, I guess, never had that conversation? I don't know. They don't have time to have sex though, because, you know, they're in a trap. I had the worst case of blue tubes in the history of womankind, and I was ready to make it everyone else's problem. I'm upset that it's my problem now because I wish I had never read the words blue tubes. Now is not the time to fuck, Marlo. We have a goddess to defeat and a sigil to break, and stop trying to stroke my dick or I'm going to make you pay for it later. We're followed by, now I'm going to make you pay for it much later and add a new day of deprivation every time you're difficult. It's actually not true because the way this book ends is literally while his dick is in her, he stabs the bad guy. I'm not joking. It was hilarious. It wasn't intended to be hilarious, I don't believe, but I was laughing. I stomped like a brat from the hotel to the lobby. As Ramis and Caliban meet, and they're immediately like, bros. Good for them. Now kiss. This isn't how I imagined the day love finally wanted to end her mortal cycle, but alas, here we are. We have a lot of day ahead of us. Shall we stick around this little haven, or do you want to meet the Phoenician goddess standing between us and a good time? Astarte runs a private fertility clinic called Wild Prairie Rose of Venus Clinic. Venus, I pictured a naked woman, covered only by her impossibly long hair, standing in a clamshell while angels and humans alike tended to her. The second Pantheon novel, Kingdoms of Salt and Sand, I'm surprised it's not a real book already, had been a conflation of Greek and Roman mythology. Venus was the goddess of love, beauty, desire, and of course fertility. So they go see the clinic, and Marlo's like, I can't go in there looking like this. So she's like, I'm going to go get a blowout, get sprayed with expensive perfume, get makeup painted on my face, get an extremely expensive outfit, have a car rented that is extremely expensive so that I can go there and convince them that I, Merritt Finnegan, not Marlo, but my author persona, wants to get pregnant. And I'm like, okay, that's certainly the beginning of a plan. Where's the rest of it? So the plan is that she's going to get all dolled up, look the part of Merritt Finnegan, this very high class, well-known author who's going to go to this very upscale fertility clinic run by Astarte, the sex and fertility goddess, but Merritt's not supposed to know that it's run by a sex and fertility goddess. She's just a rich person going to a fertility clinic that's very upscale. The idea of going and getting all dolled up so that you have an in is great. What's the plan after that? Gather intelligence. Great. How? What kind of intelligence? What are you looking for? Nothing. There's no plan. Once again, Caliban has just set up Marlo for failure. But again, Caliban's not real, so it wasn't really Caliban doing it, but Marlo was certainly set up for failure, and I just don't understand why we did it that way. And they can't go in with her or she'll be found out. So she's gonna have to go in alone. Now, I feel like this just sort of got retconned later, because then later Caliban does just go in. And I'm like, wait, then why didn't you guys just go in together? What? What's your plan? As Ramis asked. She loves sex work, money, and praise. I have the first two and can manufacture the last. I'll explain that I'm ready to have a baby and don't want to stick around and wait for a man to do it. Okay, great. Again, we have our in. What is the plan after that? Nada. Zilch. Nothing. Why? And they tell her explicitly, don't sign anything, don't give her anything, don't give her your real name, nothing. And of course, as per usual, because Marlo is stupid, she goes in there and, despite calling herself very smart, goes in there and does that. The one rule that they gave her, they certainly didn't give her a plan, but the one thing that they did tell her to do, don't give your name, don't give her anything, don't make any bargains, don't make any deals, she then does it. Her and Caliban kiss goodbye. She goes inside of this office and there's a soul eater, which she also met in hell. I don't know what a soul eater does exactly, but I think I can guess from the name. She goes inside of this doctor's office, like the actual doctor's office, and the doctor's there and there's another woman standing back in the corner that Marlo, damn it, sees, who says nothing. Of course, the goddess is like a whole ass event. I love when we're in awe of deities. I think that's really cool. But my gaze floated to the corner of the room where a similarly stunning woman in a well-tailored suit stood with her arms folded across her chest. Between her dark eyes, her evaluating stare, her pointed stilettos, and her unmoved expression, it felt like she'd step off a set after playing the role of assassin. Very on the nose. The doctor/goddess is like, what brings you in here, Merritt Finnegan? I'm a big fan, by the way. Marlo says, I'm glad you like the books. The next one will focus on South American deities and pantheons. Its primary anchor will be Brazilian lore. Pergunte a Luisa sobre isso and que isso Brazilian lore? Grávida de Taboté? Balloon priest? Acho que falo pelo Brasil quando digo now. Obrigada, now. E também, volta pra casa, gringa. Eu tô indignado! I wouldn't have taken you for a fan, Marlo said. Who doesn't love ancient worlds? Any plans for book 4? I'm heading east. I'm just not sure how far east I want to go. The Shinto gods maybe? Or perhaps something in the Middle East, closer to Mesopotamia. Of course, I'm nowhere near ready. I'd need to spend hours in libraries before I'd feel confident to tackle the lore. I'm tragically ill-informed on many of the world's religions. Religions, the goddess says, not mythology. How curious. She explains that she is on her maternal side from Norway and that she's always been deeply interested in her mother's side and the Norse mythology. And this like gives her an in with the goddess. She says, I want to get pregnant. And the goddess is like, oh, you could be one of our elite clients. Gives her a book of like men and says that she uses non-traditional methods, which immediately when I hear that in the context of this is a sex goddess, my brain just went immediately orgy. You're a sex goddess handing a client who you are trying to help impregnate a folder full of hot men. This is going to end in an orgy. I was sort of right. And so they talk about like how she uses unconventional methods and Marlo's like, yeah, these dudes are really easy on the eyes, and the sex goddess says they're easy on more than the eyes, and I'm like, I wonder what that means specifically. Like, I know it's innuendo, but like not the sex goddess like taking a dig at these dudes. So then Marlo looks at the woman in the back of the appointment and says, I'm sorry, is she present for all appointments? And the doctor says, is who present for all appointments? I loved this moment. That was actually really fucking cool. I was like, oh no, Marlo, you fucked up. So she calls in her soul eater, the doctor does, and the doctor's like, how the fuck are you seeing her? And Marlo's like, wait, do you know a Nord named Gare? Because that's my grandfather. This is his brooch that I have. You see, I'm an unconventional person who was raised knowing of my grandfather's people, and I'm seeking unconventional solutions. So the sex goddess is like, oh, that's a horse of a different color. My apologies, Merritt Finnegan. Clairsentience is a rare gift, and my clients have been almost exclusively human. I hope you'll be gracious enough to understand why it might make us cautious. They apologize, and they're like, where did you hear about us? And she says, from a demon. My friend Anord is partnered with a demon. And this doesn't make them suspicious somehow. I understand, of course, that a best-selling author has a life to live, and that life requires motherhood. Requires? I don't know about that. I think we could strike up a bargain if you'd be so inclined. Marlo's like, what kind of bargain? Wrong. Don't bargain with a goddess. That was the one rule they gave you. And see, that was the thing, is that they should have prepped her by saying, if something goes wrong, which they should have prepared for, they should have had like a plan A, B, D, and C. And a backup on top of that. You can say, oh, by the way, I am 1/8 Fae. I'm Nordic Fae. I'm on the ends. I can see shit because of my grandfather. Like, she wouldn't have had to play it by ear if they had just made plans like reasonable, logical people. And this goddess, and again, this is like my favorite part of the book, and I wish that this had been like the whole point. She's like, I want global recognition. In your 4th book, I want my name known, the one the masses have forgotten. Will you do that for me, Merritt Finnegan? Put my name on human lips once more. Make them sip from the cup of my histories. Tell them the story of my conquest. Fill my temples, the temple of Astarte. And I'm like, oh shit, that's so fucking cool. I wish that had been the point of this book. And I don't really know what the point of this book was. Marlo's like, I can't fill temples? And Astarte's like, yes you can. You're a goddess in your own right. I'm like, is she? Where did we get that from? Word has spread of Odin and Frigg's prosperity since your short human life began. It's been done in a way so they never have to step from the shadows to harvest what you sow. The Hellenic pantheon didn't need the boost your second book brought, but the Greeks won't deny what you did for them. That's what I want. And Marlo's like, what do I get in return? And she's like, the baby. You wanted to get pregnant. And so she slides her a contract and says, sign this for me and this time don't use your pen name. One rule. You had one rule. The next chapter is literally just her saying that at the age of 6, other kids in the after school program who were also poor like she was treated her like shit. And it said, by the tender age of 6, I knew I never wanted to have kids. And I'm like, okay. It's fine if people don't want to have kids. In fact, most of my friends don't have kids, and I get not wanting to have kids. I don't want any more kids. I'm good with the ones I have. I just don't like people who hate kids being children, being like the age that they are and at the stage of development that they are. It's sort of like my kid, when he was little, would cry. Now he has, certain things that he does because one of my kids has a behavioral disorder. And I'm like, you can't just shit on my kid because he is at a certain age or has a behavioral disorder. Both of those things are shitty things to do. Just like you can't be an asshole to me because, sometimes I'm really fucking depressed and I can't get out of bed. I can't really help that all that much. And kids can't help being kids. And I just this just makes me hate Marlo more. Why are you such an asshole about kids being children? And what's funny is she wants so much sympathy for the shit she went through as a kid, but cannot extend that to existing children unless they act exactly the way that she wants them to. And I'm like, you know that children are people? I shouldn't have to explain to you, a 26-year-old woman, that children are just people, and that if you deserve grace, then so do children. I thought of my lifelong vow to be childless as the technician wrapped a band around my bicep, preparing me to take vials of my blood. And she's like, I could do this. I could write a book on the Canaanite religion. And so they tell her, all right, we're gonna need 24 hours to get selections, as in men here. We're gonna send planes for them. You come here tomorrow at 5, wear whatever makes you feel comfortable, and then we'll change your clothes once you get here. I'm like, oh, okay. It says, unseasonable warmth hit me as I abandoned the air-conditioned museum to the dumbass formerly known as Merritt Finnegan. And I was like, is that a roundabout way to say that she's leaving Merritt Finnegan in the building and exiting as Marlo? I'm not really sure. So she goes back to them and she says to Israemis, Caliban's going to be really mad at me. Yeah, well, it's partially Caliban's fault for sending your dumbass in there with no plan, as usual. Why do we keep doing this? We're just going around in a circle. Let's never make a plan and then deal with the fallout, and never make a plan and deal with the fallout. She explains what happens to Israemis and he's like, you're hers. You fucked up. She's like, I'm just gonna write a book, that's all. I have to write a book about mythology anyway, it's my career, so what's the difference? And they're like, all right, 2 ways to break this seal to, stop this trap that she's trapped everybody in here. Either we have to destroy the seal's integrity or we have to kill the person who created it, which is Astarte. So now, basically, Marlo has put them in the position where the only option is to kill Astarte. And instead of, making a plan, they don't. Then we get this long-ass scene where Marlo is walking to her really nice hotel now, because they're staying in a nice hotel, and she's very obsessed with aesthetics, I've noticed. She's like, I wish the others, as in the other people around them, could see what I saw reflected back in the glossy golden elevator banks as I approached in my designer clothes, flanked on either side by gorgeous otherworldly men. I was having a celebrity moment and the pedestrians were missing out. Such a weird way to think about other people, Marlo. Despite the fact that they say planning comes first, as in instead of sex, they don't make a plan. I don't know when planning came first because nobody came and planning didn't either. So I don't know. She talks about remembering one of her past lives. He calls her Helen. I'm not sure if he was literally calling her Helen of Troy or if it was I don't know, making a connection, like a similarity. I don't really know. This got away from me. She tells them, I think she means to bring in the meat market tomorrow. I think she's bringing in men. She handed me a binder to look through potential sperm donors. Then she started going on about how artificial insemination and Western medicine has a low success rate? Haha. But it was something the receptionist said at the end. She said it would take them a day to get them here. Them. I didn't consider it at the time, and Caliban's like, well, if she's honored through prostitution, and then in her inner monologue blog, she's like, we see the distinction between prostitution and sex work. My life as an escort was empowering. I'd been the queen of my domain. I built an empire, set myself up, established my power over men. I decided who I saw and could charge them more and more if they so much as annoyed me. Whew. But self-import wasn't what made gods crave prostitution as a devotional offering. Astarte wasn't looking for agency or union or lovemaking. She was looking for the power of intimacy and taking our innermost expressions of being and making them her own. She means for you to get pregnant tomorrow with one of her whores. And I was like, I'm surprised that we called them whores and didn't challenge that in the narrative, but all right. And they're like, and she'll probably want to be present. And she's like, present? And I'm like, yeah, what do you think a sex goddess wants out of this? Like, why do you think a fertility clinic? Put two and two together, Marlo. And then they have to explain what I just said to her. I was like, what? I don't understand. She says, I don't want to get pregnant. And Caliban says, yes, that's a common theme with you. I have to say, in all your lives, I never would have put my money on you selling your soul to have a baby. Quite the twist. She gets mad and says, I don't want a goddamn crotch goblin. And I'm like, all right, hold on. I think it's totally fine, again, to not want kids. But again, when we start talking about kids like this, it gives me the ick. I don't know why you hate kids just for virtue of being kids. That's fucking weird. It's fine if you don't want to not have your body be your own. That fucking sucks about pregnancy. I resented it during pregnancy. I get that. You don't want your body to not be your own. Totally makes sense. In fact, if I got pregnant right now, I'd abort for multiple reasons, and that's one of them. The other is that I will die if I get pregnant again. I understand wanting agency. I understand all of it. What I don't understand is just hating children for virtue of being children, and that really feels like what Marlo is doing over and over and over again. Multiple times throughout this book, she has just hated kids for being kids, except herself when she was a kid, who we're supposed to have compassion for. And I'm like, all kids deserve compassion and understanding for the fact that developmentally, they are not going to make the right choices. And like, we're supposed to give grace to Marlo for that, but we're not supposed to give that grace to other kids who are just fucking goddamn crotch goblins. Like, that just kind of like hurts me for kids. That's a sad way to view children. Don't have them if you don't want them. I think that's a perfectly valid choice. Again, most of my friends don't have kids, but let's not say it's because kids are the fucking worst. Kids are people. Talk about them like they are people who have value even if you don't want to have any. So then he's like, well, we can't call in for reinforcements. Nobody knows we're here. Do you trust me? And she's like, yeah, I trust you. And that's the end of it. So in order to like make a surprise ending, we just leave Marlo in the dark. And I think that that's just like a really lazy way to write this. I'm just going to sort of paraphrase what happens because it gets absolutely bonkers, okay? She goes to the fertility clinic. She goes in, there's a bunch of dudes. The women of this fertility clinic, the doctor goddess, she gives her cucumber water that is drugged. She doesn't find this out until one of the dudes mentions it. She's talking to all these dudes. The drugged cucumber water makes her super horny. She starts coming on to literally everybody. Then Caliban decides to walk into the office and be like, I would like to impregnate that woman, please. I guess, off page. We don't really know what he said. He walks in, the doctor goes to talk to him, then brings him into it. She was about to fuck some other dude. They make that dude leave. There was like a bunch of dudes. There was like a guy who played in the NHL. There was a guy who, I think he was Persian. There was a guy who flew in from Korea. And she's like, I'll fuck any of these dudes after the cucumber water drugs kick in. And she's like, you know, bopping and booping to the music, and she's coming on to the soul eater receptionist. Well, then Caliban walks in and she's like, I know that guy, I want to fuck that guy. So she starts like moving all over him. Then stuff is happening in reception. Somehow she can see this on like a tablet or something, but she's so high, she's not really understanding what's going on. I'm not really understanding what's going on, but as Raimi's is like in the lobby, just like fighting and shit. Caliban goes in and she's super horny. They're like grinding up on each other while Dr. Goddess watches, and then she's like begging him to fuck her. So he literally sticks his dick in her, okay, while she's laying on a table. She hears him making out with Dr. Goddess behind her. She's trying to move. She can't move because her arms are like strapped down. I forget how. And then Caliban, while his dick is inside of our main character, stabs Dr. Goddess in the heart. Meanwhile, as Raimi's is beating the shit out of everybody in the lobby. And then the assassin woman who worked for her, who was standing behind her in her office, calls in a bunch of those parasites. She's super high. She was given absolutely no agency. I thought that she wasn't really high. I thought that maybe it was like, okay, maybe it's just like the goddess's magic. Nope, she was given drugs. She was having sex with the love of her life through multiple reincarnations. And not even sex, like his dick was just in her. Like his dick is just in there, just sitting. Then he stabs the goddess while his dick is just, he's just like, Okay, so very weird. I thought that we were gonna give Marlo some agency and have her kill the goddess. That was his plan. That was what she... Okay, so the parasites come out and he's like, you have the doll that Silas left you. Call him, bring him in. So Silas comes and gets her, picks her up, takes her back to Fauna. Silas goes back to kick ass with his Ramis and Caliban, and her and Fauna hug, and Fauna's like, you know that thing about sunflowers where when the sun's not out, sunflowers turn to each other as if they're the sun, but it's not actually true? We'll be each other's sunflowers. End of book. I'm not joking. All that said, I'm gonna give this a 2.25. I genuinely felt so many things during those passages about her and her mom and Fundyland. They really hit home for me. I mean, you saw me, I like teared up a little bit. Those were damn good. If we had started there, 3.25. Easy. The entire first part of the book where we dedicate this book to talking about Marlo and how she likes to manipulate other people, how she ignores her friends. Like, I'm not saying don't have a shitty main character, but don't pretend I'm supposed to care. I don't care about her at all. If she got stabbed in the face right now, I'd be like, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I do not give one single shit about her. But I'm supposed to care about her and Caliban. Like, the subplot is this romance that I'm supposed to care about, and I don't. We should have started with the mom stuff, and the mom stuff, the brokenness about that intertwined with, just like we did when we hit, what was it, like 40-30%? The mom stuff being intertwined with her meeting Caliban, and this leading to like this fracturing of her mom and her relationship, and also her relationship with her religion. But I also really wanted to see like why her and Caliban felt so strongly about each other, and I never did. They just stumbled back into finding each other, and they were like, yeah, by the way, back in the day, you and I met, and you were a Christian like thousands of years ago, and then you were cast out of your community, and you begged somebody to come save you, and it was me. And I was like, okay, cool. We couldn't have seen that at the beginning of the book, and then maybe we could have, you know, made that the prologue, and then we see Marlo's relationship with her mom and her meeting Caliban. I mean, I don't really understand what the purpose of like her having this like talking about her relationship with Nia and Kirby at all. Like, I'm not sure what point they brought to this story at all, other than to and I don't think this is on purpose, show me what a terrible fucking person is Marlo is to everybody around her, while they just like again gravitate around her like she's the fucking sun, like she's the center of the universe. It honestly made me feel so bad for them. Like, if they just walked in and they were like, you're a bad friend, I'm stabbing you, I'd be like, I can't fucking blame you. It's not like we spent any time cultivating those relationships, but again, we didn't spend time cultivating any relationship between her and Caliban either. The most we got was her and Fauna, but not enough that I feel like it makes sense for them to be like, we love each other now, we're besties. I spent 5 minutes. Despite the fact that this book was over 500 pages, it felt like it was 5 minutes and 5 years long. It was very odd. However, I cannot name you another urban paranormal fantasy that is doing deconstructionist talk. And for that, it gets a whole star from me. And on top of that, the mommy issues regarding like revolving around fundamentalist culture and like your mom, oh man, those parts where she's talking about how her mom iced her out, and like that little tiny ray of sunshine where your mom finally like, you know, shines her face upon you and you finally feel like, oh my god, I'm finally worth something. And that killed me. It got an extra star just for that. If we had just done a little bit more of the Marlo being manipulated by deities who don't really have like worshippers anymore, that it would have gotten a whole further star from me. But like, I knocked down a bunch because Marlo is an asshole to everybody, especially her own friends and children in general. Marlo doesn't ask very basic questions. We didn't cultivate relationships. Why was the devil barely in this? We could have used him so much more.
Hello, I'm a dumbass, and I was so eager to get this over with because I have uncut 4 hours of footage that I forgot to tell you what I had noted from Jules about the mental health rep in this book, so I'm gonna tell you now. Allow me to pull up my messages. Thank you for holding. Jules said that it is an accurate depiction of what dissociation feels like, honestly. I zone out all the time without control, especially in environments with a lot of stuff. Marlo mentions her SSRIs a lot, which would be a really odd thing to keep prescribing to someone with continued psychosis. Serotonin can worsen hallucinations with serotonin syndrome. Not always, but like, if she had a current therapist, this would likely be examined. Too little serotonin can cause hallucinations, but SSRIs have very low effectiveness with psychosis. This is all fine if she's also taking an antipsychotic. I understand she doesn't actually have psychosis, but she thinks she does. Maybe my therapist had a breakthrough. Quote, not how therapy works. It's a group project. If your therapist has a breakthrough, you have one together. Your therapist gives you the tools to dig into you. They don't do it themselves. Yeah, that was that was my experience in therapy. I wish that my therapist had a breakthrough and could just fix me. Mixed feelings on the representation of psychosis, because on the one hand, it's not that. This is meant to be real. On the other hand, here's where it falls short as rep. Hallucinations with psychosis are not usually controlled. Regarding the disclaimer, I don't mind the flippant approach to mental health. I know a lot of people who treat it that way. I don't think it makes sense with having a therapist, and still always having that attitude with no real moments of clarity. I don't love the throwaway mention of an intrusive thought. That's something specific. It's not like someone would just have hallucinations with psychosis. Diagnosis of psychosis isn't super common since there's a lot that has to be ruled out. She'd probably be diagnosed with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. Psychosis that's years long isn't common, nearly unheard of to this extent. Unrelated to psych, in the beginning she talks about her dating profiles being set up to filter out men who don't like curves. As a fat woman, I do not appreciate the skinny protagonist presenting herself like that. Yeah, this is like a skinny person. The main character is a skinny person with D cups. And that's, I don't know, I felt like the dating profile stuff, again, it was weird, but like the biggest point I want to make about that is that how wholly unnecessary it was. Anyway, that's what Jules said. Thank you to Jules for participating. Thank you for participating. Thank you for giving your feedback on this. Jules, again, has a bachelor's in psychology, so I appreciate them giving their feedback from somebody who is educated, unlike me, who is just a dumbass with a YouTube channel. Okay, thank you. I don't understand why Caliban never sets up Marlo for success despite being a deity that's thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. You've done this multiple times and you don't think, hey, maybe I should set her up for success this time and make a plan. No? Okay. We had so many opportunities here and we just didn't really take them as much as I would like, but then again, the stuff that I liked, I really, really liked. I mean, again, it really made me tear up. I cannot name you another book that's doing deconstruction talk like this is. Like, somebody recently asked me, what's a good fantasy book that is talking about religion from like an ex-fundy perspective, and I can only name a few. This is not high fantasy, it's paranormal urban fantasy, but like this is one that I would say, like, if you are feeling jaded and frustrated and sort of resentful about your life in fundy culture and you really need that catharsis, I would say this is a good book to read for that. Now, the parts are too far and few in between, and I wish that we had done more. Maybe we'll do more in the future. I really wish the Christian God had shown up, but yeah, this is way better than The Night and Its Moon. Absolutely, it's better than The Night and Its Moon. Those all got 1 star, I think, from me, minus like 1 novella, which I thought was pretty good. But this is doing stuff. This is doing good stuff. I mean, I feel like this, if we had just restructured a little bit and we had spent more time not making Marlo into a piece of shit who, like, you know, goes on in her inner monologue about how much she thinks that it's cool that she manipulates other people and, you know, doesn't really give a shit about her friends and absolutely fucking hates kids. If we had done, again, cultivation of relationships, and if we had started the book where I wanted to start the book, I mean, for a while reading this was sitting at 3.5 for me. It was in that section where it's like we're doing all this shit where she's running around with Fauna, still my favorite character. As Raimi's, I don't hate him at all. I just think he's a little bit too much of a goody two-shoes. And doing all that stuff with her mom, if we would have kept that up and introduced the villain way sooner, this could have easily been a 4 for me. It sat at a 3.5 for a while because I couldn't get past that beginning. But again, if we had just switched some things around, spent more time elsewhere, easily could have been a 4 for me. So yeah, that's it. That's my thoughts on The Deer and the Dragon. I think that this book has an audience. I think that people are going to be less picky than I am, obviously. I particularly think that, like, the ex-Fundy girls are going to, if you're still feeling particularly, like, ragey about your time in Fundyland, which, same, this is not a bad book to read for that. The audiobook's not bad. I think the narrator did a good job. She really does a good job differentiating her voices. However, like, Fauna has, like, a really cutesy voice, and if that drives you bonkers, which I know for some people it does, you might not like it, but I wouldn't say she's infantilized, so it doesn't bother me like it did with Assistant to the Villain. Speaking of Assistant to the Villain, this book is not anywhere near on my worst of the year list. Not even remotely close. Like, Gothicana, definitely on there. Assistant to the Villain, absolutely. Everything I read by Colleen Hoover this year, fucking terrible. This isn't even close. So yeah, way better than The Night and Its Moon. So that's great. I'm happy to report that. So I'm also interested enough to continue because those things that I saw, particularly the Fundyland stuff, I would like to see more. I'd like to have more of those really, like, cathartic moments
of, you know, where I felt like my mom was in this book. So I would like to see more of that. So that's it. That's my, is this video 4 hours long? It is, isn't it? I'm in so much trouble. I have so much to edit and I have to go to BookNet Fest this week. I'm fucked. Oh no. And it's the last week of school. Fuck. Maybe I could call Marlo to come watch my kids. I'm just kidding. Alright, I gotta go. I gotta edit this. Kill me now. I will see you for the next book because I will be reading it. Okay? Bye. Hello. I have a bunch of thank yous that I need to say. But first, primeiro eu quero dizer obrigada especialmente aos meus amigos brasileiros e a minha melhor amiga Luisa. Eu te amo. And before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Ashley H, Astrid P, Brittany Bobitney, Cami, Choco's Trash for Japanese Mysteries and Thrillers, Chris the Horror Therapist, Dalton Smith, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Emperor's New Blues, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric, GalaxyBot, Jay Naya, Jack, Jess, John E, Julie D, Keleno K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Kiara, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Grand Poobah of the Church of Josh. Y'all are killing me. Lemon Jelly, Lex, Lily B, Little Crow. Peggy, are you serious? That's it. You're not getting a hug this weekend at BookNet Fest. I swear to God. Max B, Mommy Zombie, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Panoramic Demon, Rachel C, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Sad Witch Bree, Scarlet, Shiny, SMK, Spoopy, Steph, 2 Orbit, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, Zorvictia, and Chai Guy. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And last but not least, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Slush Marxist patrons, and those are Alejandra, Althea, Amanda, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Artie the Ninth, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blake Lemon Pants, Blythe, Bookish Brainrot, Bookish by Jenna, Bree, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Darius, Danielle M, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Diet Goth, Dilf Enthusiast, those being right next to each other is hilarious. Dorian, Dorothea, E.T. Cosgrove Wrights, Ebby, Emily A, Emily L, Emma, Emma O.A, Aaron, Ezra Moon, Fiona, Gadarn, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, Haley G, Ilianaka, J.M. Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Gender Queer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jillian R, Jojo Bookish, Kat H, Catherine, Katie, Katie L, Kaylee C, Kayala, Kendra, KMTB, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura Garcia, Lauren, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Marcella, Marquita, Malara, Mentally Unwell, May, Molly, James, Natalie, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Rivi, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Sikoria, Sadie, Saint Bringer, Sakia Lume, Samantha O, Sammy C, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Super Evil Sam, that's a good one, T Delegati, Tay, Talia, 3 Old Dogs, Tiana, Trash Can Teddy, Triple M, Tito Phoenix, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend and for being willing to listen to 2.5 hours of me talking. Oh my God, if you're still here, I'm shocked. Anyway, thank you so much.